Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що нар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Good evening, viewers. I have a brief announcement to make. February 24th is the year anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war, and the enforcers will be hosting a massive fundraiser in support of Doctors Without Borders. I hope you will join us on the 24th and participate in our efforts to help save lives in Ukraine. Also, for the first time, the enforcers will be streaming live from their new podcast set on video. Be sure to tune in on February 24th here on the Enforcer channel, and we hope to see you there. Now, without further ado, please enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine here on day 362. And of course, it is the Sunday night fundraiser, the time when the Lee Spring Army comes together and blows this thing out of the sky. And of course, tonight's fundraiser is for none other than Razom for Ukraine. Razom for Ukraine is an incredible nonprofit organization that directly, well, as close as we can, directly helps out the soldiers of Ukraine and making sure, wait a minute, hang on.
What happened?
It looks like we may have been blocked. One second, let me go and check that out because it just showed up on the control board. So let me go and check that. Let me go view on YouTube. Close as we can. So it doesn't appear that anything's happened right now. That is bizarre though, because are you seeing this on the control room? It says, heads up, we've detected copyrighted audio and video in your stream, but we're playing the same stuff we always have.
Yeah, that's weird. It says your stream may be temporarily blocked.
Yeah, but everyone,
that's weird.
But viewers are still coming in. I'm not really understanding what that is and what we've done. But anyways, real quick, I think that may have actually been about the Chat GPT thing, or whatever the hell that was that we threw in.
Huh, that would be something else. YouTube's really going overboard with that.
They may be, but moving on from that, and also Sharon Tukolsky coming in with $200. Tonight's fundraiser is for Razom for Ukraine, an incredible nonprofit, getting back to that has helped out loads of Ukrainian soldiers in ensuring that their lives and their careers are secured after this war, because the military isn't going to be there forever, and this war will end, hopefully sooner than later, and these soldiers will be going back into the lives that they found themselves in before. And so, make sure to support Razom for Ukraine, because that directly helps out the soldiers of Ukraine and guarantees them a future long after this war. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into tonight's news, because we've had some interesting news coming out of the BAKHMUT area. And of course, the title says that Ukraine wins in BAKHMUT. And the question is, have they won? Because it appears that they may have actually won and concluded the second battle of BAKHMUT today, according to some information that we've gotten both from Prigozhin and also from Madyar, who was inside of the Battle of BAKHMUT and still operating a unit there. So let's go down here and let's listen to what Madyar has to say and hear him out, because it sounds as though the Russians have now put an end to the second battle of BAKHMUT, and the Ukrainians may have ended up winning this battle as well, along with the first one. So with that, I'm going to read the translation and lower the audio a little bit. Let me make sure we're still live on YouTube. Okay, now it says we're in excellent condition. So I don't know what the hell happened there. I think some third party tried to have us copyrighted for something. Someone from YouTube came down and looked at it and then said it's not. So we're fine now.
Was the impression that good that YouTube thought it was copyrighted? What the hell?
Oh yeah, also to explain that little AI thing that came up a second ago sounded a lot like someone we do a very good voice impersonation of on this channel, but it's not them. It was actually a little AI machine that did it, and it looks like YouTube got freaked out. And holy moly, look at the live chat, Matthew. Good lord.
Dang.
Eric Hutchins with 100, Paul Fitzgerald with 500. We'll be getting to everyone who's thrown in a massive amount of support here in our first question segment, but I think we might reach the $7,500 goal at this rate in literal minutes. But anyways, let me get you all straight into this video where Madyar explains what appears to be going on. Hello everyone, Madyar on the line. Sunday, 19th of February at 1600 hours. Today, the Worms announced a sanitary day. Well, announced, quote-unquote, and appeared to act. In the past days and nights, there were several assaults. Obviously, it didn't work, and they accumulated a number of dead and wounded, an incredibly high number as well. which they carried all day today. No time for assaults. They only evacuate, and we just burn their tails a bit with all available means. But Bakhmut is still under heavy mortar and artillery fire today. The worms are covering each other, wasting ammunition. Quick operational situation. The day was without intense concentrations of firefights. The night was quite active, however. Particularly in the southeast part of Bakhmut, area of the plain, and the northern outskirts of Bakhmut, in the area of Krasnohora. The east outskirt was also calm. On the flanks, no success by the worms, and no territorial success of the enemy either. So, for Bakhmut, it was a light day, but it doesn't mean the night will be calm. We'll see. We prepare actively for the meeting. I read that the Chinese are considering sending weapons to the Russian army. Barely news. Perhaps the Chinese can do it, but I see it as a positive sign. It means that the Russians do not have enough munitions to keep this war running. We see Madhyar waving someone down. Now you can perhaps allow yourself an evening walk in the center of the empty city of Bakhmut. And we can see him looking around, and it truly is empty. There's no one there but him. Smells of arrivals a bit here today. Oh, that was slick. But the worms are still unable to take a photo near the plane landmark, which they covet highly. And we'll do all we can so that way they won't. Once again, the plane is located at the very outskirts of the city, at the entrance. It's our symbol. But doesn't have particular territorial significance, as it's located on the road that you can't move on anyway. The Bakhmut-Konstantivka Highway. The plane is on the southeastern part, exactly in the area of most intense fights where the enemy concentrated their forces. To be able to come close and declare that they control Bakhmut. Ukrainian flags are in the center of Bakhmut still. We can see them walking past the administrative building in the center of the city. We have enough armed forces of Ukraine warriors and forces, equipment, to hold this living fortress. For the Russians, it's a dying battle. By the way, we could have had more ammunition and artillery shells. This would allow us to patrol less and burn more worms. As our pilots say, these are not whims, but our wants. And there was a rocket right there, actually. They properly crapped in our city. We hear more artillery flying overhead. Let's hold our course this Sunday evening. I'm reporting in a calm and... balanced manner from the point of view of being in a battle, which for us is amazing. We will endure everything. And that's the end of the clip, but there's Madhyar giving us a little bit of a dig in, I guess you could say, pun intended, into what's going on in the area of Bakhmut, and it appears that the Russians have stopped the assault for today, and they may have stopped it for quite some time into the future. Sanitary days are usually not done on a one-off basis. They're usually done several days in a row, usually 2 to 3 days, as they're trying to find every wounded and killed soldier out there and try and return them back. And if they're actually conducting those kinds of actions, especially considering the ferocity at which this battle has been fought over the entirety of the war, this gives us a very good indication, an incredibly interesting indication, that the Russian forces have finally exhausted themselves in the second battle operationally and may not be able to go on any further than today. And we also saw some more interesting news, and I guess you could say frontline changes that could be noted in the northern Bakhmut area near Yehidne. Yesterday we saw that the Russians had made, and let's wait for the map to update because apparently it's a little slow. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. 1 second, let me do that again. So here we go. Here's the 18th. We can see that the Russians were able to move up directly into the village of Yehidne, but on the next day, we could see that while the Russians were able to claim some, I guess you could say, fields leading up to the ridgelines near Berkivka, they were pushed out of Yehidne, and it appears that the Ukrainians are still controlling the large majority of the rear ridgeline to the east of the city, which allows them dominating control and presence over the city, allowing them to fire down on into advancing Russians inside of the town, and also to fire in the directions of Krasnohora as well. You can also see that Chasiv Yar is a part of that ridgeline, and is also the highest part of the ridge. This is where like a Ukrainian citizen inside of Chasiv Yar said, the Ukrainians are most likely trying to use their artillery. But moving on from that point, this ridge is pretty much the lifeline of the Ukrainian defenses at this point in the Battle of Bakhmut, considering that Krasnohora and Klishkivka have been taken, and the Russians are now moving on into securing their secondary objectives in completing this encirclement inside of Chasiv Yar and also on that western ridgeline behind the city of Bakhmut. And it appears that they've been stopped today, and from what Medyar said right there, it appears that they will not be continuing on any further than what they already have, and they're now going into these quote-unquote sanitary days, so that way there's no real pressure for them to continue any kind of heavy pushes and heavy assaults that eat up hundreds, if not thousands, of Russian soldiers on a single given day. Also, moving on into Russia, before we even get into the rest of the Battle of Bakhmut news, we heard some interesting things from a Russian soldier who put out a blog on Telegram that started to mention some incredibly interesting things that may be leading to even more heated situations in Bakhmut in the near future, maybe even in the very, I guess you could say, close future. This is what this Russian soldier says, and I'll read this off to y'all and tell me if this sounds good to y'all on a military level. But the most egregious case that I know is when a person was mobilized on September 22nd, 2022, and on September 26th, he was already in Svatove. We talked with him at the end of January, and at that time, he had not received a single penny from the Ministry of Defense. He only received a salary from his previous place of work, but that's not everything. In November, he was injured, and there's a certificate in form number 100, but they refused to pay compensation, citing the fact that they consider the injury not severe enough. Oh, crap, it's the VA. It's the Veterans Affairs of Russia. Hey, your shrapnel wounds are not service-related, Bliet. Go straight back to front. It's just trash. A man was called up for mobilization. He's been fighting for almost half a year. He was wounded, and he wasn't even paid a cent. And I personally know dozens of such stories. People grumble, discontent, and anger builds up. If the situation does not change, it will lead to a social explosion in the veteran community. Do you need it? It is necessary to take tough measures to normalize the situation in the sector. It is necessary either to return the accountants into military units or to take other measures, but it can't go on like this. Next will be an explosion. A catastrophic situation has developed with the monetary allowance of the participants of the SMO. The scale of the problem is simply indecently huge. This problem exists in every military unit, in every battalion, in every company, and not just that, every single platoon. Non-payment of the promised monetary allowance. I can't read what's behind the arrow, sadly. Let me see if I can try and catch. Total non-payment of the promised monetary allowance. Volunteer units such as BARs are particularly affected in this regard. People who were volunteered in the spring and summer of 2022 are simply marinated and strangled by the bureaucracy. That is a very interesting word, man. This guy makes it sound like they're cheese sticks at Arby's.
They were marinated in the red tape.
Yeah, they were marinated and strangled. People wait half a year for a seal on a piece of paper to prove that they are combatants. Then the circles of hell began with the military registration and enlistment offices for registration of the veteran status. The circles of hell are in fact that of the bureaucratic machine and the combat units, which is simply disgusting. And this is by a Russian soldier that is on the front and is recounting stories of pretty much everyone, probably including himself, although he didn't personally say this, not getting paid a single dime for their service. And that has to be a massive demoralizing factor, especially in the battle we're seeing right now. And maybe why we're seeing a lack of commitment by Russian forces to actually fight well, even if they are trained, although the folks he mentioned in his little post right there were certainly not trained, considering they signed up for the Russian military and found themselves on the front line just 4 days later. It's not showing a good picture of the Russian armed forces, and it's wild to hear that hardly a single soldier that this guy knows of is getting paid. And also, oh my god, Jamie Lasuski threw in $500, getting us up to $4,000. Impressive.
Did that one come through?
That one did come through, believe it or not. Actually, that took me by surprise there for a second. That's why I stopped mine. I was like, what? I was like, this came through. But anyways, this is something that is crucial and incredibly important, because if the Russians are able to manage fixing their logistical issues and actually get ammunition and bullets and such things up to the soldiers, if they're not getting paid, you're running into a far worse problem, which is soldiers straight mutinying against the military and even refusing to fight, and maybe even starting uprisings against their own government in their own country for lack of pay. Lack of pay has been one of the largest concerns throughout most of military history, because if you cannot pay the soldiers that literally risk their lives every single day for just a couple of bucks, they may turn against their commanders about as easily as they'll turn against the enemy if they do not get payment. So DCC Prime is making sure that these Russians are jealous, because he just threw in $350, which is probably the monthly salary of a normal Russian conscript. So pretty impressive. Can we get a yeehaw? Yeah, there we go.
I'm trying the new muffled yeehaw. Those come through. The loud ones don't.
Yeah, the loud ones don't. I don't know what's up with that. But still, the situation in Bakhmut is developing in an incredibly interesting way, and we've got a very small amount of videos to show from the Battle of Bakhmut, which also attributes to the large lack of fighting that we're seeing in this town. And once again, I want to reiterate this. The third Battle of Bakhmut will most likely happen. The Russians view this as really the only thing of any strategic importance, although it's a very small strategic importance, that's within the area of their front line. So the third battle will most likely occur at some point. But for now, it appears that if this sanitation day goes on any further and goes into 3 days to a week, that may have signaled the end of the second battle of Bakhmut, and it would have ended in a Ukrainian victory, although the Russians did take a decent amount of ground in the Soledar and Klishchiivka area, but they still hold the major city in this battlefield of Bakhmut, which means that it would have signaled a victory for the Ukrainians in both the first battle of Bakhmut and the second battle of Bakhmut. But let's move on into the clips, like in Blahodatne, where we actually saw that the Russians took this little lull in the fighting today to argue amongst each other about who owns what position. And this was the funniest thing, Matthew, because they're arguing like it's an Xbox Live call. So here's the clip.
I gotta see it.
It's a little quiet, but you can see the Russian soldier standing right here. You can see the Wagner soldier right here. And this guy in the middle, he is arguing his heart out about why they own certain dugouts. And he's going to be telling this guy, it's the commander. He's going to say, commandeer. Like he's saying that, but here's the clip. He's like, we own the dugout where the 3 guys died. We own that one, блядь. You stupid idiot. Иди нахуй. Look at him. This guy is so, like, emotional. This guy's getting pissed. He's like, what do you mean you don't own the crap dugout with trash around it? That's my dugout, блядь. I've been there for a week. Wait, is he aiming the... What the hell? Did
Wait,
you see
go
that?
Back, go back to the last part.
They sat there at the end of this argument. They're like, "We own that trench, dang it!" And he aims the gun at the main guy he's arguing with, and the guy in the back starts firing his gun into the air. What the hell?
Just chaos.
Straight up anarchy is occurring in the Russian lines right now, as they're now starting to fight not with the Ukrainians as to what positions they'll be controlling tomorrow. They're fighting amongst each other now to figure out what dugouts and trash pits they're going to be living in the next day. Oh my god. Also, sorry about the sound, y'all. It was up at actually, whoops. You know what, we're going to watch that end again because I didn't realize the Reddit audio clip was down that low. So let's watch that one more time right here.
На позиции, твари, блядь. Быстро собрали шмотки, блядь. И на позиции, я серьезно говорю, блядь. На позиции пошли.
I can't believe they do that. Can you believe that?
Seriously, I'm baffled. It's like well, I won't say that, but it's like something else I've seen.
Oh man. And also I saw someone saying scabs being scabs. The Tarkov reference. This is my spot, blade. Just starts firing a gun into the air to assert dominance. Like, what the hell do they think this is? A wolf pack? Like, is one of them trying to assert that they're the alpha of the pack or something? Like, it's the military. There's supposed to be some cooperation, at least amongst the ranks. You know, you're not supposed to be trying to fight each other for who's going to control the dugout that you're going to get bombed in the next day. Man. And also, VJ Spectron said, I can believe it. I can believe it too, but still, it's baffling to see this kind of stuff from what was supposedly a year ago the second best military in the world, only second to the United States. Unbelievable to see and hilarious too. But moving on into our next clip, while the Russians are still taking the bodies off the field, it looks like the Russians are going to be start stacking some fresh ones amongst each other. And also, we saw a Ukrainian BTR-4 in action today, making sure to try and blast the Russians that are still seen. So here's the clip. We got it muted, but we see this guy playing with his Xbox One inside of the BTR, firing at the Russians. And we get a pretty good look at what it also looks like from the windshields. We've never seen through the windshields before, and that's actually kind of wild to see. You now see them moving on up and continuing to fire, and the clip was short, but the Russians' lives on the other end of that gun were also quite short as well, so I guess it was a fair exchange. We're now going to be moving on out of this little bit of footage in the northern flank, and we can see that the Ukrainians are still blasting the Russians, although the Russians have decided that it's best to take a breather, considering that there's not a lot of guys left breathing. We're now going to be moving into the center of the Battle of Bakhmut, where we can also see a Ukrainian BMP firing on the Russians in this area as well, most likely trying to take advantage of the lull in the fighting to push them back a little bit and gain some extra defensive positions in between them and the Russians. Also, I have to mute that because they got the singing going on, and, you know, that's scary. We now see that BMP-2 just ricketing that building with 30mm auto fire. Golly! And all those rounds are still flying downrange, but they are ripping that house apart. Like, call this thing the non-brick layer, because this thing is not laying bricks, it's flinging bricks. You see it continuing to fire further down the street, and the Russians in these houses, man, I have to say, I think they're fairly peppered at this point. Not with salt and pepper, but just straight up lead.
Before the battle's over, they'll have the salt too. They'll add that themselves.
Well, yeah, actually, they'll dig up the salt from the Solidar salt mines and get the pepper that the Ukrainians keep on giving them in the form of BMPs, and they'll be called paprika. So with that, we're now moving on into our last bit of footage that we got from the Battle of Bakhmut today, where we saw the Fighting 93rd, one of my favorite units, and one of the most distinguished units that we've seen in the war in Ukraine in earlier battles, hitting the Russians as well with their BMP-2. And so, here's the clip. I don't know what kind of music that was.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, baby, roll Tide. We can see it still driving down the road, and look at that thing go. They are flooring it.
Those are some skinny tracks in that thing.
I know, like they're like bicycle tire thin tracks.
It's like the tracks on that Ripsaw, like civilian tank.
Yeah, kind of. I would have to agree with you. And also, we can see that this they found a Scooby-Doo van. Oh my lord, they're ripping the Scooby-Doo van apart.
Like Zoink Scoob, that fire rate's intense.
like Zoink, Scoob! I think they're aiming at us! Ruh-roh, Raggy! And then they just get blown away. Oh, man. Also, it appears that YouTube's not getting enough stream, so let's give it a second. Let's see if there's a little bit of lag. There shouldn't be. I don't know what they're talking about. YouTube is just giving us all kinds of error messages tonight. They're trying to give us every single one in the manual, but we're going to let this keep on going. And also,
Man, it's like a used BMW with all the warning lights that are popping up.
oh yeah, I'm telling you. And also, Mashbot said same footage. It is the same footage, but there's a little bit of extra stuff mixed in, so I thought I would show this one too. And that's the end of the clip. Of course, the Fighting 93rd, the one laying down the fire down there on the Russians. And it's great to see that the 93rd is still out there and still fighting. They were greatly distinguished in the Battle of Balaklia, or more so, the breakthrough of Balaklia, where they were able to blast through Russian lines and cover an area of around 50 miles in 48 hours. A mile an hour, which by military terms is lightning fast speeds. We're now going to be moving on from Bakhmut and on into the rest of the news that we've seen around the world today, because while it appears that the Ukrainians have won the second Battle of Bakhmut, and it may be coming to a close at this very moment right now, we cannot say that for definite certain. I'm fairly certain that the sanitary day is signaling that change, and I guess you could say the pace in the area of Bakhmut, but for now, we can only sit and wait, as the Ukrainians may have actually rounded out the second battle as a victory for them. We're now moving on out of the area and on into Russia, because we were already in Russia a little bit earlier talking about the problem with pay, but it appears that pay isn't the only problem that's afflicting the Russians inside of their own country. For example, somewhere inside of the Ural Mountain, the Razom plant, which I was not able to locate when I looked for it myself, caught on fire, which is one of the largest manufacturers of oil production equipment, which is a massive industrial sector of the Russian economy. We can see the plant on fire out there. It appears that someone is also having a rave in the middle of that fire. We can hear the blinker on inside of this car, the only ambience we get. And we can also see some fire trucks moving into the area like there's some kind of a formation going on parade. Kind of a little bizarre. But that's the end of the clip, and you can see that they may be having some problems producing oil production equipment. Someone call in the cops. They're going to have problems producing equipment that produces stuff. Pretty rough. And also, Matthew banned the pineapple. I can't believe it, Matthew. How in the world are we supposed to have our delicious pineapple? How? But
yes. That pineapple now lives under the sea.
Oh, man. Who lives in a pineapple under
Cringe.
the sea?
That was cringy one.
Oh, that was...
Pretend like I didn't say that.
We're gonna pretend like you didn't say that, but I don't think the live chat will be that forgiving. So
I doubt it. Roast me.
Roast. r/roast me. But anyways,
Oh no.
We're moving on down into the tiny town of Nizhny Tagil, because Nizhny Tagil is a special place amongst the heart of Russians, and I'll take you there also on this map, because I can show you the world, including Nizhny Tagil, which is in the middle of practically nowhere, not even with a major highway connecting to it, but small country roads. And this is the home of one of the Russian tank factories in the country, and also KFC. I believe, if I remember correctly, the factory was somewhere around, and let me make sure I get this correct. Nope, it's not that one. It's somewhere around here, though. Gotta find it. One second, y'all. Let me try and find this little tank factory for all of us. I'm not really finding it all too easily. They've made this difficult. It's like a game of hide-and-go-seek, but with a tank factory instead. You would think it wouldn't be that hard to play hide-and-go-seek with a tank factory, considering it's a giant stationary building, but believe it or not, it kind of is. Oh, wait. We've found a part of it. Here's the testing, I guess the testing tracks for the tanks that are produced at the factory. So we're not that far away from it. It's got to be somewhere around here. And... It's somewhere around here. I can't still specifically find it. We can also see some hardened shelters, or another part of the tank production facility further down here. But it appears that the large part of the tank production facility is somewhere in this area, although there is a larger factory building that I was able to find earlier on Google Maps. But moving on from that, the Russians are supposedly building brand new tanks T-14 Armadas and T-90Ms to send straight to the front lines in Ukraine and to win that war in a matter of a month. And once they get these tanks there, Matthew, they're going to steamroll the Ukrainians, they're going to spread them out, and they're going to pump iron for 3 days, installing a brand new government and just ending this war for all time. But what's odd about this is that the pictures they showed today of this factory were taken in 2020, or the factory has not even moved any of the vehicles on their assembly line, and they're in the same spot they were in from 2020. So here's a picture from 2020 showing you this T-14 Armada. Here's the picture from 2020 also showing that T-14 Armada again. And here's the picture from 2023, just today, showing a similar T-14 Armada with the exact same cover on top of its turret that is supposedly being produced to go to the front in Ukraine. And interestingly enough, once again, look, another picture of it. And when we move on, you can see the 2020 picture, there's a little block on the floor, and there's also a BMPT Terminator directly behind it. And how inefficient of an assembly line is this? Like, you know, you go from making a T-14 Armada to the next vehicle in the line being a BMPT Terminator.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a very efficient one.
Yeah, and when you move to the 2023 picture, look, same block in the picture, same BMPT behind it. Exact same one. So either the assembly line hasn't moved in 3 years, and this is a ghost factory that's just being kept clean to look like they're doing something, or these pictures are from 2020, one or the other, and they've had a different filter put on them, or a little bit of a higher graphic input, one or the other. We can also see, once again, in 2023, fronts of the tank, very similar, but then again, it's the same class of tank, so, you know. And then moving on from there, you can see, once again, the side-by-side comparison. And then you can see, interesting enough, this is probably the most damning bit of evidence there is here. They have a T-90M over there on this, like, you know, like one of those display racks that they put a Jeep on, you know, at the dealership lot, where it's got, like, the suspension lifted up on one side and it's kind of leaning a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, take a look at that, and then in 2023, they show the exact same picture of an exact same T-90M, but this time with the turret turned to the right, and that's the only difference. The only one. So it appears...
Interesting.
Yeah, it appears...
I will have to admit, unfortunately, I'm quite busy. I would like to look, but I don't think I can.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Take your time, Matthew. Take your time. But still... To address this to our viewers out there in the live chat, Mr. Speaker, it appears that either they're lying and these pictures are from 2020 and they're just putting a different filter on them, or these pictures were taken in 2023 and this factory has not produced a single tank or even moved a single tank off the assembly line for 3 entire years, meaning the Russian war industry is practically non-existent. It may not even be there, but still... quite nice to see, and I hope that we see that those pictures were actually taken in 2023 and that not a single tank has rolled off that assembly line in 3 entire years. Moving on, however, into the United Kingdom, we also got to take a quick little look today, and also let me make sure to change the color of that so that way we can make sure to keep track of which day it's on, where we saw some Ukrainian soldiers in training. Take a look at this. We can see some Ukrainian soldiers right here with AKs. They're being trained still on the AK platform instead of the, I believe it's the L85A1 or the L85A2 that the British are using currently. In the next picture, we can once again see them training. They have the yellow safety caps on the front of their AKs, but they're wearing largely British kit, which is fairly cool to see. I do like the British uniforms and the British kit. We can see them moving in, I guess you could say, a squad formation through this tree line right here. In the next picture, we can see them advance. Well, it appears that they may actually be withdrawing as these two guys are looking to the right. This guy is running in from the left. So they may be simulating a withdrawal off of a field. In the next picture, we can see a Ukrainian soldier handling a faux wounded soldier, meaning a fake wounded soldier. He's not actually wounded, but they're pretending like he is. Wait a minute, actually, this guy's got a white armband on, so this may be simulating taking a prisoner or how to deal with the sleeping Russians that you'll find commonly across the front. And then in the last picture, we can see this old British chap right here teaching them about certain kinds of things, but it appears that the board is completely empty. That was actually photoshopped later. There's clearly something on the board because he's pointing to it, but of course, it's neat to see that they're still getting a vital amount of training from the British Armed Forces, one of the highest trained and best armed forces in the world. It is definitely not comparable in size to the United States, but in terms of quality and training, certainly on a similar or even a little bit of a better level. So it's good to know the Ukrainians are getting that kind of training, and hopefully we'll see them using that back on the front lines here soon, although this has been going on for quite some while. Now moving on all the way back, almost into our way on, well, inside of Ukraine, because we're about to begin to our location unknowns here in a second. We also saw some Avengers. You know, not the Avengers like Captain America and, you know, Black Widow and the Iron Man and all that stuff, but we did see the Avenger anti-air systems being moved in Poland, and these responded close to the border. Once again, just because we see these vehicles close to the border doesn't mean that they're heading into Ukraine immediately. They may be moved to basing areas, or they eventually will be moved into Ukraine, but this does show that those Avengers that were unloaded from the ship in Bremerhaven have already made it close to the Polish border and may be used there sometime in the near future. Now you see 2 on one truck, 2 on the second truck. So 4 Avengers total right here in this convoy so far. We can also see what appears to be an additional 2, bringing the number up to 6. And now we can see what appears to be another 2, which is bringing up the number of Avengers in this convoy to 8. 8 total. And if you multiply 8 by 8... and I'm not good at math, so give me a second, because I know I'm probably going to get this wrong, so let me whip out my calculator. 8 times 8 is something like 64, I believe. So 8 times 8... it is 64.
Man, it's a rough day for math.
Oh, it's a rough day, I gotta tell you, and it's a sad day to all of the math teachers I had in school that still didn't impart any mathematical knowledge on me whatsoever, but anyways, 64 of Stinger air-to-air missiles could be fired from all of those Avengers at a single instant, all of them put together. And I can see everyone now telling me that 8 times 8 is 64. I thank you all so much for sharing that with me. I'm never good at maths at all, and math is hard, Rob. It's incredibly hard, especially for me, because my entire brain power in school was put into studying things like history and English, and I never really put a lot of effort into math, and I was never really good at math anyway, so sorry about that, y'all. Anyways, 64 Stinger anti-air missiles on all of those Avengers, and it's great to know that the Ukrainians will be getting that kind of frontline air, surface-to-air firepower here in the near future. It looks like the entire live chat's taking turns roasting me for my poor mathematics knowledge, and for that, I do truly apologize. We're now going to be moving on out of Poland, and on into our location unknowns, because, of course, the location unknowns are straight Jews. Absolutely incredible Jews. Daniel Miller said, "Are you tired?" I'm tired. But anyways, getting on into our location unknowns, we actually got to take a look at the interior of a Max Pro today, a armored vehicle that we've been seeing around the fields of Ukraine a whole load, and also seeing how well of a protected vehicle is to the crew inside, but we've never really gotten to see the interior in its original untouched condition, and we actually got to see that today in our location unknowns. But before we get into any of that, Matthew has been throwing up some killer polls, or...
I've been throwing them up.
Yeah, he's throwing them up, Matthew. Quick, throw up another one. All right, and this one reads, is the enforcer bad at math? There's only 2 options, no and very bad, very, very bad. So anyways, moving on from that, Matthew's been throwing up incredible polls, and I want to make sure we cover them because a lot of y'all here have been putting in votes on them, thousands of votes on every single poll, and I want to know what all of y'all are thinking right now about these little polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Also, before we jump into our 3 polls to address, we have to address our fundraiser. We're at $5.3 thousand of the $7.5 thousand goal. So extremely good progress. We're about, I think, what is it? This is math again. So about 35, 40 minutes into the stream. So we're doing pretty good, I got to say.
Whoa!
Whoa! Put in the 300.
Mob Core only 352 donated $300 US, getting us to $5.6 thousand. Let's get it. Let's get it. Call them out. Call them out. Impressive, I'd have to say. But with that, let's do we want to call out the top donors first or the polls?
I say let's go through those top donors because we have a bunch tonight.
And I would definitely agree with that. I would second that. I was just testing, Matthew, just testing. But with that, let's hear them out.
All right, so first up, we have two $500 donations. The first one is from Paul Fitzgerald. The next one is from Jamie Luswiski, who said we pronounced the name correctly earlier, but hopefully I repeated it correctly again. But thank you both. They also have a 350 from DCC Prime 1 and a 300 from Mob Corleone 352 that we just saw a moment ago. And then we have a 200 from Sharon Tukolsky and Stephen Mintier. And then we have several 100s. We have one from Maria 5555555, and then we have one from Enforcer for President, Activista, Eric Hutchins, Activista again. Then we have one from Mob Corleone 352, who says, shout out to the LSA Discord police friend. And yes, indeed, shout out to the Discord mod team. And we also have a 100 from Gently Used Oreos. We also have one from Kitty. We have one from Malachite, something like that. Then we have one from Mob Corleone 352 once again. Very generous. And then we have one from Zoan Tran. And then we have a 69 from, guess who? Psyops. Nice. Then we have a 50 from Super Bonker 9000. Stephen Mintier.
Holy moly! Tiger 2 threw in $1,000! That just completely overshadowed the $100 I threw in right there because I forgot that I didn't donate tonight, so I just threw it in. But holy moly! We're just $500 away from the fundraiser goal right now. Let's get it!
That's what. Wait, 7,000. Oh, wow. We're getting so close. But up next, we have a 50 from Jose Ruano. Then we have a 50 from Richard Rohde. Let me try to get through these. The next one is from Stephen Mintier, Terrence Custer, Richard Bell, Dad Good, John Webster, Axel K, Nas Red. Then we have one from Justice Ryan, Anti-Defs, Cindy Mitchell, Avari Mendebratis, Commander Prankster, Greg Carrier, and also Bill Vanderpool. Thank you all so much for that top donations of the night, and we appreciate it very much. And also, Enforcer, what say you?
I've got to say, tonight has been unbelievable. I don't think we've ever raised $7,000 for a fundraiser this quickly in a very, very long time. Probably 10 months at this point. And I got to thank everyone so much for contributing to this fundraiser because y'all have helped to reach records in this new year, especially at how fast we've been able to help out a fundraiser. So, on behalf of me, on behalf of Matthew, and on the behalf of the entire Lee Spring Army, I thank every single one of y'all in the Lee Spring Army for helping us to get to this point. We're just less than $400 away to the fundraiser goal at just literally 54 minutes in. That's absolutely insane. And I've got to thank you all so much once again for helping us to get here so quickly. And Mama Corleone, 352, throwing in another $200, getting us less than $200 away, or just a little over 100 to the fundraiser goal. The next person who throws in a fat 100 may be the person who gets us right over the top of that goal. And so, with that,
Also, forgot to call it out. I must have missed it in the chat. We had a 100 from Donna Olson, channel
let's
legend.
go!
And also, thank you, Donna, for that
We
as well.
did it! We reached the goal! Yeah!
Igor, Jaga, Jaga,
Igor, jaga. We
Love
did it.
Ukraine.
We did it. We've done it. We're already nearly $400 above goal. Probably $500 now, but $400 above goal in 54 minutes. Unbelievable. We didn't even have to call a general order tonight. Not one, and we're well over the fundraiser goal already.
And shout out to Terrence Custer as well for putting in a 50. And also, I thought I saw another one here, but I think that was the only one I saw.
Man, absolutely unbelievable. We just reached 8K already. Man, this is what the Sunday fundraisers are all about. This is unbelievable. And I got to thank the entirety of the Lee Spring Army that's going literally mental right now in the live chat, which is really cool to see, for helping us to get to this point. That $8,000 is going to be going to help out soldiers in Ukraine and making sure that they have a future after this war, and that is as amiable and as honorable a goal as any. And I thank you all so much for helping them out in that aim. And so with that, I hope we addressed the top donors tonight incredibly well. And of course, there were a load of y'all who we did not call out, hundreds of y'all. Sadly, if we did that, we would be here all night. But I do thank every single one of y'all for y'all's support to this fundraiser. Whether it be $1, $5, $500, or $1,000 like Tiger 2 threw in, every single bit counts. And every person in the Lee Spring Army does their part, and clearly does their part, to help these fundraisers to reach unbelievable heights. And so with that, we're now moving on into the polls and then some questions. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And the very first poll we have says Ukraine is in critical need of ammo, says Europe's top diplomat. And with ammo crisis fears growing, what are your thoughts? 69%.
Nice.
I don't know how I got
Nice.
to that number, but nice. Says the ammo crisis must be real. 16% said unsure, 10% said it's only an attempt for more support, and 5% said no, it's probably not real. Now, with more and more people of positions of power saying that they must have an ammo shortage, there must be some truth to it. It doesn't seem like Ukraine's really making a big deal out of it, I don't think. Oh, thank you. I was about to get that one. But it seems to me that they really need to start conserving their ammo a little bit more efficiently. And also, shout out to Miss Disa, who put in a 362.
And thank you to Miss Disa for throwing in a $362 donation for $1 every single day of this war. And that's where that number came from. That's actually really cool. And also, just in case if we didn't clarify, and of course I'm kidding before I even say this, Carl was correct. This fundraiser is for blow, for that fine Peruvian blow. But I'm just kidding. It's not. If you go down to the bottom right of your screen, if you're on a desktop, you'll see exactly where all the fundraiser funds go to, how they're accounted for, and what YouTube does with them. It tells you outright. So anyways, moving on from that, I've got to say that the ammo situation may be getting a little concerning. I don't think the Ukrainians should start conserving ammo. I believe we should send them enough that we are able to match or even help the Ukrainians build up a surplus to the amount of usage they have, because that artillery is helping the Ukrainians to hold the lines where they are and also pushing the Russians back whenever they conduct offensives. And without that vital artillery, they may not be able to do as well as they are right now and may begin to lose. So we may not want them to conserve ammo. We may want to give them even more ammunition so that way they can keep up at the exact same rate they are right now. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And we are on to, of course, the next poll.
All right, and the next poll says, today, Zelensky says that Ukraine will continue fight in Bakhmut while mitigating losses. And what are your thoughts? 47%, which is the most popular choice, said fight to the last moment possible. 13% said, is Bakhmut critical to Ukraine? And 24% said don't waste ammo and lives on Bakhmut. And 17% said unsure. And on this one, I'm going to have to kind of go with the unpopular choice, which is don't waste ammo and lives on Bakhmut. From the looks of it, it has been basically wiped down to the foundations of the buildings there, and it's a total wreck. So I think, to me, especially with maybe facing an ammo shortage, they might want to consider falling back and strategically retreating. Not because they have to, just because it would be the smarter thing to do, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's an amiable goal to try and hold the town for as long as possible and mitigate casualties. And I would say I would have to actually go with the majority. That's not that bad, because it still sounds like there's a condition in that statement that if the town gets encircled, they're obviously not going to be mitigating casualties if they allow a large amount of troops to be encircled there and then die. So I'm sure that they mean we're going to hold the town as long as possible until the last available minute and then retreat. So I think that's a fairly smart move to make, considering you don't want to give up advantageous ground in a killing field unless if you have to, because that wouldn't be a smart military strategy to just start giving up areas just because it looks a little rough at the moment. You only want to give it up when you see your final window to leave or to pull out the soldiers from that area. So that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well in my opinion, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last and final poll of the first question segment says, trade data allegedly, and make the point to say allegedly, shows that Chinese companies are still supplying drones to Russia. And what are your thoughts? And specifically, I refer to consumer drones, and I won't name the companies, but 52% said China has always provided support, 38% said China will increase supporting Russia, and 10% said unsure. And like we've gone over before, the U.S. is concerned that China is going to start supplying military aid to Russia, and I think that would probably be a logical next step for China to do if they want to buddy up with Russia a little bit closer, which to me is a big possibility. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have a feeling that the civilian drones are a bit of a concern, but not that large of a concern, considering that it seems they're getting quite a small amount of them compared to the Ukrainians, and we haven't seen an excessive use of drones on the Russian side. So if they are getting that kind of support still, they're not getting much of it, and it's apparently a very small amount of shipments going to Russia. And on top of that, we already know that the Russians are incredibly poor and they're hardly getting the kind of support that the Ukrainians are getting internationally. And so they're having to buy these drones directly out of their own pockets. And that's going to be really hard for Russians to do, considering that they're relatively poor. And they're also getting no support on top of that. So I would say it's not that concerning. I still don't think the Chinese will be all on board for giving lethal military support to the Russians, considering that could put them at incredibly difficult odds with their largest economic markets, which is the European Union and the United States of America, as well as Canada. Really, the North American sector, they're incredibly invested and interested in continuing that trade. So I don't think we'll be seeing any lethal aid soon, and I don't really know what to make of them supplying drones to the Russians, because they also still sell their civilian drones to the rest of the world. So it appears that they're just playing the neutral stance on that point, and they're selling to anyone who's buying. So I hope that addresses the poll, in my opinion, fairly well. But I do think it would be a little pertinent to pressure the Chinese into not allowing those companies to sell their drones inside of Russia, considering what their battlefield implications are. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And do we have another poll, Matthew?
And that was our last poll for now, but of course, there will be many more. But real quick, before we move on to our 3 questions, I want to call out a viewer who has done something very kind. They've sent us something to the P.O. Box, and I checked it today, and I was very, very excited and happy to see it. It was a package from Walter A. Lakota Jr. from Hawaii, which he always gives us a fun fact about. And he sent us 2 ship coins of the ship that he sails on. So very, very cool. He's always been showing us those ship coins, and it was so cool to see them in person. So I just want to say thank you, Walter, for that. And also, Enforcer, what do you think?
And I think they're incredibly cool, especially coming from Neptune's Roughnecks. Really neat, I'd have to say, and I got to thank you so much for sending them. I was actually going to bring that up during the question segment, because, you know, that's usually when we bring up that. But still, this is as good a point as any, and I've got to thank you so much once again, Walter, for sending this to us, because they are incredibly cool. And we're also going to make sure to find a way either to show them on the podcast or to have them in the background of the set. Incredibly cool, though. I'm actually holding mine right now, and in case if some of y'all are wondering what it looks like, the front side of it has this green, I guess you could say, seal around the outside of it that says USNS Loyal, and then it says on the bottom of it Guardians of the Deep, which actually sounds pretty hardcore. And then if you flip it to the rear side, it has the shield of the Merchant Marine, and it says US Merchant Marine, and then at the bottom it says Neptune's Roughnecks, which I think is actually kind of funny that it says Neptune's Roughnecks. I was like, that's pretty good. So incredibly cool to see. Also, Matthew, it looks like we're going to have to get rid of Gouda, too. We're getting rid of pineapple, Gouda. We're going to have nothing to eat by the end of the night. Oh, he got him. Thank you, Matthew. I was actually getting him right there. But still, I got to thank you so much once again, Walter, because this is incredibly cool. And we're going to make sure to find some way, shape, or form to show this on the podcast. And so, thank you so much once again from the OG LSN Bosun. And with that, we are now on into the questions, I believe.
All right, and up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. We have Rumpelstiltskin, CFA, WFTU, Mark Hodges, Chris Simonson, and also JP's RCs. They said the Morse code tonight says, only 6 more days until the 24th of February, and will you be there?
And you all are absolutely correct. There is only 6 more days at this point until February 24th comes around, and I'm just asking, just asking for a friend. Are y'all going to be there? Are you going to be there, Matthew?
I will be there for sure, because that thing can't run without me. I get no respect around here. I get no respect.
I get no respect around here. I get no respect. But still, I hope y'all are all there. It's going to be huge. We made an announcement for it at the beginning of the stream. The little guy that we had, the AI guy that said that, he was a little quieter than I wanted, and I tried to turn up the volume on that thing as much as I could. It still wasn't that loud, and I didn't know it'd be that quiet sounding right after the loud anthem. Of course, great. That was from Vanilla RPG Soundtracks. Love that anthem. But still, make sure to watch on the 24th. We are promoting that as much as possible, and all of the channels that will be on that night, including Operator Starsky, Ukraine Matters, and Dennis Davidoff, are also going to be putting out community posts on their channels as well, letting everyone know from their viewer basis when this stream is happening and to hop on and help us to support a fundraiser and send that thing to the moon. And so thank y'all for deciphering that Morse code message, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question comes from Avari Mendubratis, who says, Enforcer, how effective would you say Russian spy satellite coverage is over Ukraine?
From what we can't really say for certain on a technical aspect how good it is, but we can say from a I guess you could say a qualitative aspect how good it must be, considering that they were blindsided in the Balaklia offensive and they were also blindsided in any offensive actions occurring around Kherson. We saw that in both of those instances the Russians were practically flying blind and didn't know where Ukrainian troop buildups were occurring and what was happening in any of those areas, and also due to the lack of updated and modern information that they had on Ukraine's abilities in 2022, we can also assume that the amount of satellite footage and intel that they got before the war was also incredibly low at that point as well, considering that they struck Ukraine's oldest surface-to-air missile defense systems at the first hour of the war instead of their most modern surface-to-air missile defense systems. So with that, I hope that answers the question the best we can without any actual quantitative data. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, remember, tonight we don't have any super chats. So if you have a question, put at Enforcer Matt with no space in between Enforcer and Matt, and I will see your question. I will add it to the spreadsheet. Tonight's a free-for-all, I guess you could say. But our last one of the segment goes to Enforcer for President, who says, when are the tanks arriving in Ukraine?
We know that the Leopards are supposed to be arriving within a matter of a few weeks at this point. We would assume somewhere in between 3 to 4 weeks the crews will be ready with the tanks to go into Ukraine, and beyond that point it will only be a matter of loading them onto some vehicles and shipping them into Ukraine, where we'll actually see them inside of the country. So I would assume that it may be at least within 5 weeks time from now that we'll be seeing the first Western main battle tanks, such as the Leopard 2s, which appear to be the ones getting ready the quickest to make their way into Ukraine and start giving the Russians absolute hell with those very nice tanks. So with that, I hope that answers your question fairly well, and we are on to the next one. Oh, you're cutting.
And that was actually our last.
Really?
That was our last one of the segment.
I can't believe it. I was having so much fun answering them. I want another. Dang it. I'm just kidding with you. Anyways, we're moving on into our location unknowns and on into the neat little clips we have tonight, starting off with the interior of a Max Pro. And I was alluding to this a little bit earlier, but these Max Pros are quite spacious on the inside, I gotta tell you. So here's the clip. Oh, we gotta mute that. That's trap. But going on the inside of the Max Pro, we can see that they got nice little bucket seats for the guys to sit in the back. It's pretty spacious back there, and this thing even looks heavily armored from the inside. Like, if you're trying to blow out of that thing, I don't think you'll be able to even blow your way out of the inside of the vehicle with how heavily armored that thing looks. It's fairly impressive.
What was that? What was that piece in the middle that said no feet? Like right in the middle of the vehicle.
Let's see here. Let's see. No feet. He's putting his feet on it. I don't know what that is. If anyone can answer that, if anyone can answer that in the live chat, we would be greatly appreciative to know why you can't have feet on the red bars on the floor. And also, I guess that's to some people, you know, who are not so savory that are, you know, into feet. Maybe they're saying no feet. Anyways, we're moving on from that location unknown clip and on into our next one, where we saw some Russians get boinged out of a trench, and they were roasted out of this trench. Ukrainians
and I see some folks saying it was segmented, so apparently it like moves up and down while the thing's in motion.
Huh, that's interesting. That's actually kind of wild. I did not know that. I thank y'all for sharing that with us. And we can now see the Ukrainians looking at this shoddy Russian trench that they've covered with 2x4s and some hopes. It looks like they tried to make this thing in the shape of a artistic-looking seagull, and that is not going to help them out whatsoever, as this bomblet is going to land directly on top of the Russian trench, pop its way right over into the ammunition, and cause what appears to be a gasoline fire, although we don't know what that is that just started burning. We can see Russians scurrying around in the trench because they don't want to get boiled like a crawfish, and that's the end of the clip. It looks like this guy is actually just leaving his position. He's like, I'm collecting out, I'm done, I'm going back. So that's the end of the video, and nice to see that they're able to burn him out. And so we're moving on to our next one, where we also saw a Ukrainian helicopter medevac. This is a fairly interesting clip, so here's the video. Also, I'm going to have to mute it. Great job, whoever the editor was, for giving me an epileptic fit right there. We can see the ambulance moving up to the Mi-8. We can see the rear loading door opening up. And we can see the ambulances pulling up with the wounded soldiers as they get them on out of the area and fly them to a hospital. We've rarely ever seen Ukrainian helicopter medevacs occur before, and this is something incredibly interesting and quite costly in terms of resources, considering that an entire helicopter, which is somewhat rare for the Ukrainians, and a decent amount of fuel has to be used to evacuate these wounded. But it does show that apparently the Ukrainians do have the luxury of, I guess you could say, expending resources to this degree just to evacuate wounded, which is very good to see, and it's also good to know that they take such a care of their their soldiers in general, that they would medevac them by helicopter. We're now going to be moving on into our next bit of location unknown news, where we also saw another Russian soldier has been captured. Call this man a s'more, or the Michelin Man, because this man looks like a Michelin.
Сука.
And that's the end of the clip. But look, it's another Russian soldier, and it looks like they tied his arms with like some kind of wire. I don't know what kind of wire that is, but still, they got him, and that's all that counts. I'm talking so quickly at some points, I'm like jumping over my words, but we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of location unknown news, where we saw a Ukrainian T-72B3 in service with a brand new camo net. And this is a pretty cool video, and so let's sit back and let's take a good look at this T-72B3.
Т-72Б3 образца 16 года или Т-72Б3М. Вот, двойной ряд динамической защиты. На одном кадре снимаем. Снимаем скорость и поворота башни.
We see them rev testing the tank. We can also see them rotating the turret. That's what you're watching right there on the screen. Man, that turret moves kind of quickly.
Скорости подъема опускания пушки.
We now see him moving the gun up and down.
Максимальное отклонение от пульта.
You now see him still playing around with the gun elevation mechanism. And that's the end of the clip, but I gotta say, it's really nice to see that they've pimped out this T-72B3 about as good as they can, and they're going to be out there blasting Russians away with their very own tank that the Ukrainians are capturing and using against them. Very nice to see. And once again, Matthew, the Pac-Man toggle is clearly visible inside of the turret.
The Pac-Man. Oh, you mean
Yeah.
like that little control up there?
Yeah, the little controllable. Yeah. This is central control. But anyways, we're moving on. We're moving on from this little clip and on into our last one from the location unknowns, where we saw the Russian losses for today. And strap yourselves in, because we actually saw that the sanitary day is having a massive impact on how many Russian soldiers are lost per day, and we actually kind of get to ascertain how many losses the Battle of Bakhmut was giving the Russians in dead on a daily basis. So, without further ado, here's the losses. 590
Oh,
Bobcats.
one Bobcat.
One Bobcat. But on top of that, only 590 Russian soldiers were killed today.
That's kind of gotten low all of a sudden.
Well, it's not that low. You know, you still got to keep it in context. The British lost 450 soldiers on average per day in the Second World War. So it's still not low by modern war standards, but 590 Russian soldiers killed in 24 hours. It's certainly showing that the sanitary day is having an impact on the loss rate, and it appears that it may have deducted an entire 400 soldiers a day off of the kill count. which shows that the Battle of Bakhmut alone was accounting for about 400 Russian deaths a day, or about half a battalion tactical group's worth of force just being disintegrated in the fighting on that part of the front. We also saw that the tank and armored losses, though, today were not low. They were actually both quite high, with 12 armored personnel carriers destroyed and also 7 main battle tanks. No supply trucks were destroyed, which is incredibly rare and quite odd, as a matter of fact. We don't ever see a complete lack of supply trucks being destroyed. So this is one of the first days in a long time that we've ever seen such a thing. Quite an oddity. We also saw that 1 artillery piece was destroyed, no drones destroyed, no MLRSs were also destroyed, and we saw that 2 additional cruise missiles were shot down, and 1 Bobcat skid steer was destroyed. So all in all, in terms of the losses, this is not an incredible day. The only way you could say it is somewhat good would be in the armored personnel carrier and tank losses alone, but beyond that, it hasn't been that high, and that's definitely showing that due to these sanitary days in the Battle of Bakhmut, the Russians are losing less forces overall because the dogged offensive is no longer continuing with the exact same fervor it had before. And now that I said dogged, Matthew, I feel like that very hyped up North Korean reporter that's always sitting on TV going, you know, like I'd say the dogged defense. But anyways, we're going to be moving on from the Russian losses on February 19th. Not that spectacular, but still, it's good to know they're losing 590 guys just today. And this is considered the lowest day of about a month. We're now moving on into the frontline news, right out of the location unknowns and right into the fire itself, because the Northeastern Front has been producing some interesting results today, although over the past 24 hours, you can see that the Ukrainians have been getting the upper hand, and these may be a part of those interesting results. Now, we allow this part of the map to load because the map is being a little touchy tonight, so we're going to give it a minute. It may just be a little temperamental. We can see that the Ukrainians are actually advancing through the marsh just north of the Seversky Donets River and making their way on past Dubrova and Kuzmine and maybe trying to attempt an encirclement. If that does occur, we may see that Russian forces are in a much more precarious position than they thought they were in the Battle of Kremenna, and they may start to panic. But the panic is really going on even further north of the front line of Kremenna, as we saw in the area. This marker is a little inaccurate. It's most likely in the area of Krakove where this happened. But we did see another T-90M burning in a field. This one was destroyed today by the 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade, which was once one of the main units fighting in the Battle of Kherson and one of the units that liberated that city. But here, without further ado, is the clip of another incredibly rare T-90M on fire, burning, and completely destroyed. Call them out. Call them out.
Call them out.
We can see that T-90M right there burning. And I gotta say, Matthew, get it? It's a T-90M, and I went, they both have the same letter. But we can
that
see
one went right past my head.
Man, it went right over your head like an artillery shell coming in. But we can see that T-90M roasting, and they burn. These T-90s just burn so well. It's like a nice, slow-rolling fire, and we can see the outro right there, but another T-90M destroyed. The best tank they have on the field, the T-14 Armata, has never been seen. We're thinking it probably will never be seen, even in the future, due to all of the mires of mechanical issues that it faces on any given day. So that may be the best tank we ever see, and they're losing them like nothing else. They've lost 2 of them in the course of a single week, and considering that there's only 30 of them, that is quite a high number of losses. That's about 6% of their... Well, let me think about that again. Yeah, that is about 6%, I believe, of their entire...
Man, you're heavy on the math tonight. You're being risky.
Yeah, I mean, I'm running it wild tonight, man, but about 6% of their entire T-90M force has been wiped out in a week. So with that, Enhancer said, I got it. Didn't make me laugh, though. Oh, sorry, man. Sorry. I'll try and make the jokes better. So with that, we're going to be...
I think that was she, though. She said he...
Oh, sorry. But with that, hi, I'm Chris Hansen. Can you have a seat? But anyways, we're now moving on from that area in the north and down on into the area of Svatove, where we saw a Ukrainian team hitting a Russian tank today with great fervor. Watch this. You see the drone flying around?
Вообще немає поміг. І ти бачишся?
Looking for a Russian vehicle to hit, and when you see that this field has been pop-marked by artillery shells.
Чотенько все, бля. Лучше, ніж перший раз.
Сука, я нічого не бачу.
Вони, походу,
You see the little Russian thing, блядь, just moving around in the field down there. It appears that they're trying to line this up.
ото екран. Я сниму очки и буду без очків. А, понял. Розвернув. Сейчас. Щоб він не виключився, все видно на ньому? Видно,
We
видно.
can see it right here. They're getting ready to line this thing up and slam them good. We can now see the drone flying in on its way to the tank. Oh lord.
Походу.
Oh, it's go! Oh, right in the engine bay! That thing is out. That thing exploded right on the engine bay, most likely caused a fire, and that's it for that tank. The crew most likely abandoned it right after the end of that clip, and sadly we don't get to see that because it was a kamikaze drone, so it wasn't really around to take any more film, but they did destroy that tank through the engine bay. That actually sounded wrong. But anyways, we're now moving on from the area Svatove and down into the Kremenna area where we saw the Ukrainians making a modest gain. And while they were making a modest gain, the Russians took some footage today of their glorious, glorious vehicles in action, like this BTR ZD. And I'll show you what this looks like because you can't really see it that well in the film. But a BTR ZD is a BMD that has had, well, let me find a better picture of it, that has had a 23mm Gush gun put on top of it, and that's literally just what it is. You can take the Gush gun off the top of this thing and use it as a stationary mount. So it's pretty jank, it's pretty backwards in terms of its technology, and kind of wild to see them actually using this thing. It kind of shows you how desperate they are for any kind of infantry support. But here's the clip of them using the goofy Gush gun inside of the tree line. You now see them firing at quite some recoil on that little Gush gun. Now you see a BMP-2 firing as well alongside the BTR-ZD, but we don't hear any fire from the Ukrainians at the beginning of the film, and it appears that the sound of the 30mm has also busted the microphone inside of this camera or whatever it may be that's filming. You now hear them screaming, and it appears that they may be on the move.
Короткий очередяй, по противнику, огонь! Левей!
But you know, something that's a little obvious to me, Matthew, is that you have a BTR ZD that where the crew is literally just exposed, like they're just out there on top of the tank, literally sitting on it. And I'll try and get you a picture of the crew in action on this thing right here, actually. It looks like we may be running into some lag right now. And we're not. YouTube's just once again throwing up the arrow lights like it's a BMW. But we can see the crew on top of the BTR ZD right here. And do you notice something about them, Matthew?
It looks like Tony might have a heyday with those.
Yeah, and also they're in the wide open. If there were infantry out there, they could literally just shoot the gunners off of the gun, and they would be fine. And then on top of that, in the video, you see this guy on the BMP-2. He's outside of his cupola, outside of the protection of the, I guess you could say the hatch that flips up in front of him to give him a little bit of protection, and they're firing it into a tree line, and we have not heard any infantry fire coming from it. Now, seeing that that pretty much both of these crews are completely exposed to the wide open and the elements, you would think that someone would try and shoot them off of the vehicles, but we didn't even hear a single shot from the supposed Ukrainian side in this video. Meanwhile, it appears that the Russian logging operation is moving on with success, as they've been able to chop down about 5 trees in about 3 minutes. Oh, wait a minute! Oh my god, you can actually see it! Look at that stupid crew! Like, they're literally hanging over the side of the tank!
You know those, like, trucks that pick up, like, tree limbs and stuff? There are the guys, like, sitting on that chair with, the boom arm to pick up the leaves?
Uh-huh.
That's like what that guy looks like. He looks like he's sitting on one of those boom arms.
Yeah, he kind of does. Imagine how much lead they're inhaling when that thing fires.
Темп малый, осколочно-фугасным, огонь!
Now they're getting a little bit closer to the silent tree line. Once again, all the crews are completely exposed. That looks so stupid.
Влево еще! Пониже!
Meow meow.
Пониже.
Медисни.
Влево и пониже. Все,
Also, do you notice that all of their rounds are hitting like 30 feet off the ground in the trees? Like, I haven't seen a single one of them hit the ground yet.
Yeah. Hey, what's this guy dabbling about while this thing's shooting?
I don't know.
Право, давай, право.
Now they're going to spin the turret around and shoot on the BTRCD behind them.
Хорош, хорош.
Now you see a tank's come up and is firing into the tree line as well. And it's not producing any results because the Ukrainians move forward more today than any side has over a month. So it's not producing any kind of meaningful results for them. So with that, we're now moving on from the area of Kremenna and the only clip that we got there from Day. And also I'm going to put this back in Ukraine so that way we can make sure to keep track of this later on. And we're now moving on down into the area of Verkno-Kamyanka, where we saw the war stash is back. Some of y'all may remember War Stash from way early on in the war. He's actually right there. And for some reason, he looks like Daniel Day-Lewis in the Gangs of New York right there. I don't know why, doesn't he?
Yeah, somewhat. I found out because Jay Bagwell sent me a picture that War Stash fellow. There it is. That's a Mark 18 Daniel Defense.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, that's really cool. But I gotta tell you, man, he looks like he's about to walk out of this house with like a butcher's knife and go, "Who's gonna be the leader of the 5 points?" Like, he looks like he's about to say that. But once again, the War Stash is back at it out there. And it's great to see that the War Stash is still okay. He's been fighting in this war for pretty much ever since the beginning of it. And since the opening days, he's been there and fighting in it. And he's still out there. And he's still having a good time with friends, just like the caption says. Hey, gee, man, it's like the caption. Got it right. So anyways, we're now going to be moving on from Verkno-Kamyanka. Just wanted to show y'all that the War Stash is still out there, and he's still having a fun time. I remember way back in the day, Matthew, when we first saw the War Stash, and we commented on what a hell of a mustache he had, and then watched him go beast mode on some Russians for a little while in the northern area of Kyiv, and then he just kind of faded away. He's always been out there. He's always been fighting. It's just that we never really saw a lot of videos of him to report on this channel, sadly, but still, great best of luck to the War Stash, and it's really cool to see that he's still out there, and he's still the leader of the 5 points. So with that, we're now... so it's at Bill the Butcher! Yeah, it's Bill the Butcher. We're now going to be moving on from the area of BAKHMUT, and further on down the line and on into Donetsk. We did not see any frontline videos or activity in the area today to report of, but if we do go to the frontline map and go over the past 24 hours... Let me get down there and let this thing load real quick. You will see that the Russians actually got pushed back a little bit in the area north of Avdiivka and have now retreated back up onto the, I guess you could say, what should we call this highway? The Donetsk-Konstantinivka highway. So you can see that right there. It's a very small movement, not really that much of a change, and really nothing to report. While it is good news for the Ukrainians, it's not massively good news, so no point in trying to harp on it. So we're now moving on into Donetsk, where we saw the General Prosecutor's office went up in smoke. It appears that the General Prosecutor is not really liked anymore in Donetsk, and their office has been torched for that reason. Man, I gotta tell you, that fire is prosecuting that building, if anything.
Why is the smoke yellow? Could it be toxic chemicals? We may never know.
Well, if it was made in if that building was built in the Soviet Union, you know it's toxic chemicals. It's like lead, arsenic, and everything else. When you see a firefighter trying to get up there, but it doesn't appear that they're doing all that good of a job, and he's actually getting back down now.
He said nope.
He said, nah, man, it's done for. I'm not doing it. And that's the end of the clip, but the General Prosecutor's Office, they just aren't doing that good. But I can tell you one thing that is doing good, the fundraiser, because we just reached $9,000. Call him out. Call him out.
Call him out.
But it's absolutely great to see. And I can't believe we've reached well over tonight's goal. Tonight's goal was a little lofty compared to normal at 7,500, and we've already gotten to 9K. 9K. That's $1,500. I did the math. I actually did it right there in my head. $1,500 over the fundraiser goal for tonight, and I'm absolutely blown away that we were able to do it. And so, thank you everyone once again for helping that fundraiser to get to where it is now. So with that, we're now moving on out of Donetsk because That's all we have to report from Donetsk today, sadly, but hopefully the Ukrainians will give us something more to report from in this area soon. We're now moving on down into the southern front, and of course, we have to do a little bit of frontline analysis here, too. Over the past 24 hours... Oh, whoa, oh my god, man, dude, nothing happened. Oh, this is scary. So, but moving on down to the Volodar area, we did see that the battle had picked up a little bit today, and we saw some interesting clips, like Idiot Central. And this is a fun clip right here. The Ukrainians are actually inside of this ditch, and a Russian tank is going to drive right by them, while the drone operator is on the radio with the tank commander yelling, "They're behind you! They have an RPG! Hit him! Run him over!" And he never did. He just kept on slowly driving forward, and they were able to slam an RPG shell right into the back of the turret of the T-72. So here's the clip.
Так они с автоматами, у них больше у хохлов нет ни хрена.
They only have assault rifles. The Ukrainians have nothing else, although they call them a slur. We can also hear some trap remix in the background, so we're going to turn that down a little bit and hope that YouTube doesn't pick up on that, because I want y'all to hear the audio.
These are the Russians playing the trap remix, or the Ukrainians?
The Russians, actually. And so the Russians have 2 of them, yeah? And actually, there's a little bit more than 2. There's maybe like 3 or 4 of them here. Oh, man, and that trap remix is just kicking it up in the background. That's kind of scary.
Man.
Tell them
That's that losing the war type beat.
Yeah, man. Tell them they only have rifles. Wait, one has a grenade launcher, блядь. He has an RPG, блядь. And the tank commander fired at them, but he didn't hit him. Like, that was the stupidest thing. It fired right over him. Like, the round just went shoo right over the top of their heads. So he said, "Get it. Someone fire at them." So here comes the Russian tank. He's yelling at them, "Point blank. Get him, point blank." And what does the Russian tank do? It literally just starts driving right by them at 2 miles an hour. Go left and run over them. They can fire from behind, блядь. And listen to how freaked out the drone operator is. It's like, turn left, turn left. Samir, medium left, medium left. They're still moving up. The Ukrainians are lining up a shot. He says, F, they'll fire at his back. F, they have a grenade launcher. They'll fire at his back. But you see him getting the RPG ready right there. He's like, "Oh, buddy, I got something ready for you, man." Tank's still
Just like that thing's just like dragging along.
And then they just slam it right in the back of the turret. So Spalling's probably gotten into the compartment now, and the crew is having a little bit of a burn on top of the turret. I don't know if that's coming from inside, breaking to the outside of the turret, or if that is on the outside of the turret, but there's been a fire right there. And now the drone operator is saying they should get out, they should bail. And it's still going at 2 miles an hour. He should have just ran over them, блядь, but no, he's still trucking along at 2 miles an hour.
Man, that thing is sick. Put it down.
He said, "Fine, the tank is fine." No, it's not. It got hit by an RPG on the right rear of the turret.
That trap remix goes hard.
Yeah, man, that should be hard. But he said they're still there. He's like, they're still there. I didn't see it in the clip, but hilarious. Like, that whole entire thing was literally a clown show. And then now y'all can see why I named that thing in the caption Idiot Central, because that was literally just idiots on all ends. The Russian end in the tanks, the Russian end on the drones. The only people in that video that were not idiots were the Ukrainian soldiers that literally just ducked when the tank fired over them, and then just got right back up with an RPG and was like, "I'll show you how to shoot someone." But with that, we're moving on to the next clip from Volodar, where we saw a Toss also got hit and caught on fire in the area today. This was done by the 72nd Mechanized Brigade, which is good to hear. It was a very short clip, but you can see the Toss on fire right there.
Look at that thing flying across the screen.
Oh, those are watermarks.
Oh, it's a watermark. Oh, God.
Wow, man, look at that thing
I couldn't
flying
see it
across
from
the
here.
screen. It's got to be a UFO. It's literally a watermark. But man, I mean, I guess if you looked at that at a glance, you'd be like, what the hell is that thing? It's aliens, man. But with that,
send in the F-16s, you got to shoot that thing down fast.
send in the F-22s with an AIM-9X. We got a watermark flying around, and that thing's hostile. But anyways, that's the end of the clip, and nice to see they were able to get a Toss in the area as well. Moving on to our last clip from Volodar today, we also saw the Russians getting slammed a third time, because the third time is, in fact, the charm. And also, these guys were holding hands as they ran away. which was an interesting note that the caption made. So the music is busting, saying we gotta mute it. We see them running away, holding hands. We're going to go dancing through the lilac field, my brother. And the artillery said otherwise. When you see it raining down on the area, it looks like a grad, actually, that's raining down some rockets. And oh no. Well, looks like they were holding hands until the literal end. So we're moving on from this clip and on into the next one. Because nothing happened in Volodar today. The front lines didn't change. We only saw the Ukrainians picking up a little bit of whipping the Russians, and it looks like they whipped them well. Thwack. So with that, we're moving on out of the Volodar area and on into the area of Butchak, or Burchak, where we saw the Russians being hit by mortar fire from the Ukrainians today in this area. You see a literal Russian group. Like, this is at least a platoon running through the village. You see them watching them as the McDonald's fryer is going off in the background.
Повтори, блядь.
Oh!
Туда, ищи, уебалы, красиво, блядь!
Yes, yes, sugar, sugar. They got them dead on, man. That was a whole group of them that got had. And, you know, and everyone's always wondering, why are the casualty reports giving such high numbers? You know, because several hundred, like 500 to 600 Russian soldiers getting killed in a day in a modern war is, like, unbelievable, really, compared to every other war. But then you see clips like these, and you see a couple of them a day, and you know that all of this isn't being filmed. Like, they're just getting slammed like that, and it's not being seen by us, and it's like, oh, that is fairly believable, especially considering what we're seeing right now. But with that, that's the end of that clip. But I gotta say, it's straight up juice, and those Russians certainly got juiced. And we're now moving on down into the area of Berdyansk, where we saw that there was a fire that broke out in Berdyansk today. It apparently was on some kind of a recreation center, but the Russians had turned it into a field hospital. We don't know whether this fire was set by partisans trying to burn the makeshift hospital down, or whether this was some kind of ineptitude on the Russians' end. But we did see that the hospital, the makeshift hospital, had been engulfed in flames.
Горит
Which is
коса.
quite interesting.
Райский уголок.
Also, note the smoke is a thick black, showing that really interesting to see. We don't really know what to make of this right now. It could be partisan activity, could be anything really. But for now, all we know is that the hospital burnt down, and we don't really know if there were any survivors or what, or if there were even people in that building at that point. But we're now moving all the way down out of the southern front and on into Kherson. Because if y'all have ever thought, if you ever sat there and you were one of those people, Matthew, that sat around and went, oh man, the ISIS videos aren't coming out like they used to. I wish I could see some really jank stuff being made and fired at people. Well, the Russians got you covered today because they pulled out the thing. I don't even know what the hell this is, but they pulled this thing out and they started firing it at Kherson. And it's just...
They did what? They they what?
they whipped out the thing and they started shooting it at people. I don't even know what the hell this is, but take a look at it. What the hell is that? We got the medical trolley, блядь. We got the barrel. And now we're going to hip-hop around this crap and make it look cool. Although it's literally just some kind of a stupid thing that's running on office chair wheels. Why is this guy skipping around and hopping with everything? He's like a hype guy at a rap concert.
Damn.
What the hell is this thing?
Dangerous thing.
That thing is dangerous. And we see it explode in the distance. So this has got to be the weirdest, stupidest thing I've ever seen. And it also has a second barrel on it, which he has to start up. Wait a minute. Hang on. Oh yeah, it does have a second barrel on it.
Dang.
This thing is stupid. Another like, click, pick up that stupid thing and get it out of here. I don't even know what the hell this is supposed to be. Someone said it's a recoilless rifle. Yes. But what the hell is the mount it's on? Like, that is the stupidest looking thing. Look, it literally has office chair wheels. You're telling me that's like normal? No, like that's
Don't
not
they have
normal.
like wheel locks for that or something, like to keep it stable? It's like rolling around when they shoot it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it might be the cheap office wheels that don't have that. But that's the end of that clip, and that tells you how desperate the Russians are for stuff, is that they'll take a recoilless rifle and make like a ghetto carriage to put on the bottom of it to drag the thing around. Like, I don't even know what to make of this stuff anymore. It's just straight stupidity, just raw and unfiltered. Hey, I'm Vladimir, and welcome to Jekis. And then they pull out this thing and start firing it. But with that, we're moving on to our last clip from the Kherson area, where we also saw the Russians resupplying a small unit they had somewhere on the shores of the Dnipro with a boat, and it gave away their position, and the Ukrainians blew them away because of it. Also, that sounds like pretty good music, but we have to mute it. We can see them pulling up in the speedboat, and we can see the Russians running out of this house that they've made to like a secret safe house in a way. We can now see them bringing the supplies back, the boat's leaving. And the drone's like, oh, thank you for letting us know which house it is. So now they're calling in artillery on that house, and we're about to see it land. Right there. Ooh. Oh. That house is gone. Whatever they brought in the house appears to may have been explosive. You can even see the blast from the other side of the river.
Damn.
They're gone. Yeah, you can see the mushroom cloud right there. Those guys are gone. They're not coming back. And oh my god, the house was destroyed literally to the foundation. It's not left. That thing is
having
gone.
flashbacks. Is that Chernobyl again?
That's amazing. When the grenade landed on their house, the Russian said, "It's okay. It's okay. We'll be fine." And then he turned into that skeleton, like evaporating me. One second, I gotta go find that. Skeleton explosion meme. Hang on. Oh man, I found it. The Russian guy said, "It's okay. I don't think we'll blow up." And then he turned into this guy over here on the right. And the house is gone. Like, the house is just gone. I can't. That's crazy. I don't even know what the hell they'd have in a house like that to blow it away to the foundation. But I guess you could say it's gone with the wind, and it's not coming back. And the Russians inside that house, I don't even know where the hell they went. Bet you they got atomized. But still, that's the end of that clip. And you see that the Russians in the Kherson area are literally turning into the Wile E. Coyote of the military world down here, literally speedboating their way to drop off supplies and then creating a mushroom cloud out of a small house and also whipping out the thing to fire at Kherson. They're turning into a joke down here, and it's getting better and better by the day. So we're now going to be moving on from here.
It makes you wonder. Damn, son, where'd they find that?
Get out of here! Oh man, that joke for you is like the Rodney Dangerfield for me. Well, actually, that's an insult. It's not that bad. Anyways,
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
man is going to cry after this stream. It's not a Rodney Dangerfield. I'm just kidding. It's not as bad as Rodney Dangerfield. It's a good joke. I'll say that. I'm just kidding with you. Anyways, we're moving on into the area of Kyiv because, as you can tell, we've gone from the green to the olive, which isn't on a usual stoplight, to yellow to red. And red is today's speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 362 of the war in Ukraine. Rounding out tonight's news at $9,200 raised on the fundraiser, an unbelievable amount, and nearly 1.7 to nearly $2,000 above the fundraiser goal for the night. And so, without further ado, here's the speech.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні хоч і неділя, але дуже змістовний, як завжди, робочий для держави день. Провів засідання Ставки у новому форматі, розширеному. Доповідали і головнокомандувач, і командувач напрямків, і були доповіді безпосередньо з передової. Ми вирівнюємо ситуацію, робимо все, щоб підготувати наші дії, заплановані на перспективу, на найближчу перспективу, а також те, що робиться зараз цими днями на передовій. Головнокомандувач доповів щодо ситуації в цілому на фронті, особливий акцент на мобілізації, конкретну ситуацію, те, як і що здійснюється. Детально заслухав доповіді на ставці щодо кожної бойової позиції, кожного найгарячішого напрямку. Бахмутський напрямок, Осув-Хортиця, була доповідь командувача генерала Сирського, як захищаємо наші позиції, як посилюємо саме цей напрямок і скільки забираємо сил ворога. Вугледарський напрямок, отут Донецьк, доповідав генерал Содаль. Ситуація дуже непроста. Боремось, ламаємо окупанта і завдаємо Росії надзвичайно відчутних втрат. Ще раз і ще раз повторюю, чим більше Росія втратить саме там, саме на Донбасі, Бахмут, Вугледар, Мар'їнка, Креміна, тим швидше зможемо завершити цю війну перемогою України. Заслухав доповідь щодо ситуації на півдні, зокрема, Одеський напрямок, доповідав генерал Гнатов. Ситуація без змін, контролюємо всі можливі перспективи. ОСУ Таврія, доповідав генерал Тарнавський щодо конкретних результатів захисту. Я дякую усім нашим воїнам, хто береже Запоріжжя і увесь цей напрямок. Обов'язково північний напрямок, Київ, була доповідь генерала Наєва. Генерал доповів, що ситуація повністю під контролем, як і по всьому північному кордону. Була доповідь міністра внутрішніх справ по формуванню нових бригад гвардії наступу. Є дуже хороші результати. Це дуже корисний досвід того, як можна і треба мотивувати людей. І такий формат роботи, як на ставці, так і в інформуванні щодо управління обороною буду підтримувати. Хочу, щоб наші люди знали і розуміли, що і як ми готуємо, що і як ми контролюємо. Ну, звичайно, воєнні питання, деталі, дій, розвідки – це те, в чому усього не розкажеш, але хочу, щоб саме зараз у наших людей була передбачуваність і відчуття, що Україна рухається до своїх цілей. Доповідь щодо цього зробили Буданов, Малюк, Литвиненко. Сьогодні є новий санкційний крок нашої держави проти усіх тих, хто підживлює російську агресію, підписав указ про введення в дію рішення РНБО щодо санкцій проти російських фінансових суб'єктів. Це санкції України. Але кожен такий наш санкційний пакет покладається в основу роботи щодо санкцій з партнерами. Зараз триває підготовка чергового санкційного пакету Євросоюзу, вже 10-го. Ми працюємо з партнерами, щоб посилити його, але водночас ми працюємо із іншими суб'єктами глобальних відносин. Санкції за терор – це те, в чому зусилля кожної відповідальної держави здатні підштовхувати глобальний процес. І це буде. Говорив сьогодні з президентом Франції Макроном про подальшу оборонну підтримку, про захист наших людей всієї Європи. Дякую пану президенту за розуміння наших потреб, за спільне відчуття того, що не можемо втрачати жодної можливості і жодного тижня у захисті від російської агресії. Ми обговорили наші спільні дипломатичні зусилля з Францією, нашу співпрацю на міжнародних майданчиках, а також важливі рішення, які готуємо на цей тиждень, на рік нашої незламності. Провів сьогодні також кілька нарад з урядовцями, з нашим міжнародним блоком, офісу та уряду. І з представниками сектору оборони будуть нові наші ініціативи, нові результати для України, нові здобутки у відносинах з партнерами. Дякую всім, хто захищає Україну. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто зараз в бою. Дякую всім, хто допомагає нашій державі. Слава Україні!
And so with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. While I turn this down to make sure Matthew doesn't blow out our eardrums, because he will. He will at volume 80, because usually the stream runs and my desktop audio is at volume 24. If I ran it at volume 80, real
You
quick.
are blasting, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, you are blasting like crazy.
That's crazy, because I didn't change any settings on my mic. Maybe, wait a minute. Maybe that change, is it changing right now?
Like, you're still loud, like same volume.
Huh. That's weird. Anyways, we have rounded out tonight's stream. I don't know what happened to my microphone to make it so much louder, but of course, we are moving on into our question segment, also recognizing all of the top donors that have come in between the last question segment and now to help this stream to reach it to $9.2 thousand. But before y'all all get off for the night, and I know a lot of y'all are going to be turning in for bed before we get into this last little question segment, which will most likely last about 40 minutes, I've got to thank every single one of y'all for y'all's help and cooperation in helping this fundraiser to get to $9.3 thousand, thanks to that anonymous $50 donation that just came in right there. It is a crazy and unbelievable thing to think that we have made it so far on this fundraiser tonight, and this is the last fundraiser we're running before February 24th, which actually happens on a Friday.
Oh.
So it's quite a good lead up to the Friday fundraiser that we're having. Very weird. We've never had a Friday fundraiser. That's also going to be replacing our Sunday night fundraiser for this upcoming week as well. So Sunday night will actually be a normal night as far as how the channel runs. It'll be super chats instead of donations to a fundraiser, because the Sunday night fundraiser will have run on Friday. But still, I gotta thank every single one of y'all so much for all of y'all's generosity to the Ukrainians, y'all's generosity to this channel and helping us to keep running on the normal weekdays, and everything y'all have done on y'all's own volition, like contacting your government officials and letting them know that the support to Ukraine should continue, and everything else. It's been absolutely unbelievable. And just on the couple of days leading up to the year's anniversary of this war, the Lee Spring Army has done more than any other YouTube community that I can think of. And y'all are one of the best out there. I don't even say that because y'all are my community. I say that because I literally have not seen a better community out there than the Lee Spring Army. And so thank you all so much once again for being a part of this tremendous fundraiser tonight. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into calling out our top donors to tonight's fundraiser in between the last question segment of this one, moving into the polls, and then addressing questions for the rest of the night's stream. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so like the enforcer mentioned, we're at $9.3 thousand on the fundraiser, so well above goal. And our top donors since the last time we called them out are Running Bear, who puts in a 200, and also Scott PGH, who puts in a 50. And thank you, Running Bear, and also Scott, for that support. And we appreciate everyone very much. Any donation amount, like the enforcer says, small or large, helps us reach that figure. So once again, a very successful, very successful fundraiser day. While I see a bot there, let me grab that one real quick. And also, take it away, enforcer. What do you think?
And I gotta say, it is absolutely impressive. I haven't seen such a grand fundraiser like this one since last week, because we actually had a really good one last week. But still, I'm completely blown away, and I gotta thank y'all all once again for helping out this fundraiser, because it's great to know that through the power of the Lee Spring Army, through the power of friendship, we're able to reach such unbelievable heights with our fundraisers. And so with that, we are on into the polls, I believe. And take it away, Matthew.
All right, and we have 3 polls to address, maybe 4 during the last question segment. And the very first one says, if taking back Crimea will likely cause a nuclear attack from Russia, what should Ukraine do? 45%, which is the most popular option, said Russia will not go nuclear over Crimea. 44% said Ukraine should take it anyways. 6% said unsure, and 4% said Ukraine should forgo retaking it if so. And I'm going to go with the 45%. I don't think Russia will go nuclear over Crimea, because if they were willing to go nuclear, in my opinion, I don't know why Crimea would be the catalyst for that, because they're going to end up losing the Ukraine war. And if that doesn't cause nuclear war, then I doubt Crimea would. But enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the chances of them using nuclear weapons, of the Ukrainians enter Crimea, is low to moderate, but it's much higher. It's infinitely higher than the chance of them using nuclear weapons due to the current shortcomings and setbacks that they're finding themselves facing on the front lines right now, because those really have no strategic concern for the Russians in a big picture. They could lose the DPR and the LPRs, areas that they controlled from 2014 to 2022, and it wouldn't really mean much to them in the big strategic picture. If they lose Crimea, however, that has long-lasting implications. Like, for example, with the Black Sea Fleet being based out of Sevastopol, and the Turks not denying any militaries or navies access to the Bosphorus Strait unless if it is a instance of war. For example, the Russians and I believe NATO at this point have both been barred from passing through the Bosphorus Strait. Beyond that, they're allowed to pass. And so in a normal non-wartime situation, whenever the United States tries to conduct any kind of activities in the Middle East, like stopping Assad from using chemical weapons on his people, the Russians can send the Black Sea Fleet down through the Bosphorus, out of the Black Sea, and into the Mediterranean, and start to directly, I guess you could say, have a standoff with the U.S. Navy that is also in the area, and trying to, I guess you could say, power project what the United States would want in the area, and also stopping people from committing war crimes, and also pursuing American interests in the area. If the Russians lose the Black Sea Fleet and that ability, the United States has practically uncontested sway over the Middle East. There's no one around right now that has the kind of, I guess you could say, pull and say that we do in the Middle East right now, except for the Russians, and the only way they can do that is through the Black Sea Fleet. Beyond that, there's really no good way for them to go down there and power project unless if they were to send the Russian Air Force and set up air bases like they have in some places in Syria. But even then, that's a lot less than they could pull off through the Black Sea Fleet. So really, for a U.S. perspective, there's many ways you can argue the Ukraine war. There's many benefits for everyone involved, the Ukrainians and America included. But from an American perspective, the way I would look at this as the President of the United States and trying to figure out how to make the United States benefit out of this as best as possible, it would be incredibly impertinent by the end of this war for the Ukrainians to push the Russians out of Crimea and out of Sevastopol port, so that way the Black Sea Fleet would have to go elsewhere. And some people are throwing up different kinds of options and solutions, like what if they go to Novorossiysk, which is not that far away and also has a fairly large port. The problem with Novorossiysk is that it just does not have the extensive port facilities that Sevastopol has. Sevastopol has been built up over literal centuries, either through Turkish control or Ottoman control or Russian control of the Crimean Peninsula, to have a pretty formidable fort and also naval base to be based out of on this area. I mean, look how big the Sevastopol Bay is. It's huge. It spans for miles in every direction, and it's incredibly suitable for any kind of port work. Novorossiysk, while being a pretty sizable bay and a pretty sizable port, it's just not that large. It's smaller, and so the Black Sea Fleet may not be able to operate efficiently out of Novorossiysk for maybe an entire 5 years to a decade, because the facilities for that fleet would have to be built up here to actually be able to function properly. Or, I actually saw another viewer bring up Sochi. Sochi hardly has a port at all, and you can see the only port they have is right here. And that is not big enough at all for the Black Sea Fleet. You would have to expand the Sochi ports by a massive margin, a huge degree, an unbelievable margin actually, especially even compared to Novorossiysk, to be able to supply and base the Black Sea Fleet out of there. So really, if the Russians lose Crimea, there's really nowhere in the near future, for at least the next decade, for the Black Sea Fleet to go except for to another port. And those would be cold water ports further north, like St. Petersburg, Arkhangelsk, and they would also still have to expand the port facilities in these areas as well. Or they would have to circumnavigate probably the entire globe to make their way over to Vladivostok on the other side of Russia and base out of there until another base could be made for them, maybe in Novorossiysk, but that's still a long ways ahead of them, and also incredibly expensive for what would be a economically weakened and defeated Russian Federation. So from an American perspective, the Ukrainians retaking Crimea is of utmost pertinence because it allows us to power project in the Middle East and be completely unopposed by even the Russians in a diplomatic feint. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, many say that if the West does not continue to increase aid, that Ukraine will lose. What are your thoughts? 75% said true, Ukraine does need more aid to win. 10% said false, Ukraine would still win. 8% said it depends on the severity of the Russian offensive. And 7% said unsure. And I'm going to agree with that 75%. I think that without increasing the aid to Ukraine, that they will likely lose. For example, the ammo crisis situation. We have to help mitigate that in some way, and I think the only way to solve it is to up our production of ammo and weapons and send them to Ukraine. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's definitely important to increase the amount of support we're sending to Ukraine. It appears that, like I said in the beginning, the politicians in charge of most of these countries are starting to focus on the abstract. And it's great to focus on the abstract things like aircraft, but seeing that there's no real ground to be made there still has to be people carrying up the mundane work at this point of making sure that the base, the building blocks of support are still being sent, like ammunition and artillery shells. Without those, the abstract doesn't count. It doesn't matter if you get a Leopard 2A6 into Ukraine if there's no ammunition for that tank and if there's no artillery to support it whenever need be. It's going to be practically useless. So we need to make sure that more support is delivered to Ukraine, not in abstract things like fighter jets and tanks and such things like that are still on the horizon right now, but in real things that the Ukrainians need right now, like artillery shells, ammunition for small arms, and such things like that. Also, Psychotic Dom, no, you're not banned. I see you in the live chat, man. I'm just kidding with you. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well. And what do you think, Matthew? I heard that you say that they need more support, but what do you think about it in that regard? Do you think they should be focusing more on the abstract or the building blocks of support?
I think they need to focus on basic support because right now everybody's getting caught up on the jets, like you were just saying, and that is sidetracking everyone from the very basic, like I guess you could say, like what's it, guns and butter issues, like the small issues that they're completely ignoring, basically. But honestly, I'm not sure if it's Ukraine using too much ammo too fast, or is it a issue with our production? I might be falsely accusing the West of not supplying enough because Ukraine is probably using more because they're fighting off that Russian wave that's coming in.
That's probably the case, and the reason why we're not really seeming to keep up with it right now is because you have to remember that our production is currently focused on peacetime production, and the consumption of ammunition and shells in peacetime is much lower than in a conventional war, even on a lower intensity scale. And so that's probably where the fault lies, is that we have not had enough artillery manufacturing and shell manufacturing to be able to send a massive amount to Ukraine. But I have heard that the United States is tripling its artillery, shell, and ammunition production, so there should be a decent amount heading to Ukraine in the future, and this may be a short-term problem that the Ukrainians are seeing and looking at right now.
Interesting, interesting.
Yes, quite. I agree. Very much so. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll very well. Quite. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And the last poll, and y'all get this. This is a serious poll. It's almost written like a joke, but it's serious. The Chechens say they want to create their own mercenary group like Wagner. And what are your thoughts? 78% said, "Is that a joke? LOL." 12% said unsure, and 10% said, "I'm concerned about this." Now, I've got to say, in order to be a prominent mercenary group, you have to start off with competent people. And it looks like to me the Chechens aren't going to qualify for that, at least from what I've seen. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to have my good done. Let us find the goods done. Like they did earlier in the war. You remember that?
Yeah.
Oh no, they were getting that go into that shed, and they were pumping iron for 3 days, but it was horrendous. I would say that's a joke. It's serious though. It's probably a serious comment by whoever's in charge of Chechnya right now. I actually think it's still Kadyrov, although he resigned like months ago, like 6 months ago officially, but for some reason he's still in charge. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I would say that's most likely a joke, because I can't imagine the Chechens doing well in a mercenary group. They don't even do well in their own official military groups. Marion Diemert said no way in hell, and I would also have to say no way in hell. Also, don't you think it's funny, because I was just looking at this, Matthew, at Chechnya. This is Chechnya right here. You see a little dotted line where the mouse cursor is? Those are the borders of Chechnya, and there's only about one large town in this entire province, and it's just Grozny. That's it. Like, the rest of them are quite small, like Urus Martan. Let's pull up like the population of that town to get an idea of how big it is. Let's see here. A population of 63,000. So Urus Martan is just about 7,000 less in size than BAKHMUT, just to give you an idea of that's like the second biggest town in all of Chechnya. And there's only like 2 or 3 other towns its size, and then just Grozny. And the Second Chechen War, okay, now put this in mind. This shows you how good the Russian military is. The Second Chechen War took place over 10 years. It took them 10 years to put down the Chechens, and there's hardly any Chechens. Like, it's just Grozny, Urus Martan, Ochkoy Martan, and then maybe Gudermis, and that's it.
Yeah.
It took them 10 years, man! And wait a minute, hang on. Let me go down here to a map, and let me show you how they did it. Because unlike the first battle where they literally just drove down the highway, this highway here, actually, I'm sorry, it was this one, near Nagorno. They drove straight down this highway and into Grozny. Unlike the first war, which they actually lost against the Chechens, the second one, they literally just slow-rolled their way through the province over the course of 10 whole years. And I can't find a map of how they moved, but it was literally just in a line from north to south through the entire province. And it took them 10 years to put down the Chechens. And the Chechen, like, what is the population of Chechnya? 1 second, population of Chechnya. Just 1.3 million. It took a country with a population of 109 million people, with Chechnya being an independent country, 10 years to dominate over a country with only 1.3 million people.
A little sad. So sad.
A little sad, I would have to say. But anyways, moving on from that, I still think it's a joke, and we are on to the next one, if we have one. If not, we're on to the questions.
All right, and that was our last poll. But real quick, shout out to Rustin Rott for putting in a 50. And we're up to 9.4 thousand. So thank you all for that support. Doing really good. Doing really good. But with that being said, we are moving on to our questions. And we have quite a few really good ones. And I saw somebody say research compressor for PC mic input. And I'll have to do that because I need to fix this mic because I can't do my yeehaws properly. So I'll look into that. But the first question we have is from Robert Gersner, who says, Enforcer, what's happening now is very disturbing as history is repeating itself with Russia playing the role of World War II in Germany.
And I would agree. We've been pointing that out a pretty good bit with how the Russians are using almost the exact same propaganda rhetoric and such things like that. And I would say that is fairly concerning from really anyone's perspective so far. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, but I'd certainly agree with you.
All right. And I guess with that, we're on to the next one.
Yeah.
And the next one goes to Colin Walker, who says, did you see the vid of the Russian soldier who found a crashed kamikaze drone and he poked it with a stick and he blew it up? And yes, we did see that.
We saw that last night, and I guess you could say that whole idea blew up in his face. Oh, man. But anyways, I hope that does address that fairly well. And yes, we did watch that video, and it's quite hilarious, I'd have to say. No Russians were harmed in the making of that video. They were laid out. So with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a question from Duncan VR, who says, is Ukraine's strategy to simply wear the Russian forces out of supplies and men on the front line rather than push a big attack?
So the Ukrainians' plan for the war is to try and really just to try and survive. Their goal is not necessarily to conduct an offensive, although it kind of has changed in the war goals over the course of the war. Once the Ukrainians learned that the Russians could be defeated on the field, the goals started to shift from just mere survival to reclaiming the land that they've lost from the Russians. But still, in a way, their aim is to just survive. That's why you see that the Ukrainians' offensive actions are somewhat limited and only taken whenever there is a massive difference in between what the Russians are capable of and the Ukrainians are capable of, such, for example, in the Izium and Balaklia area and also in Kherson and the northern area as a whole, which we don't have marked on this map, but was still very important. It appears that their aim is still to just try and survive the war. So if that means grinding down the Russian army until there's practically nothing left of it and then bringing them to the peace table because of that, that is Ukraine's aim. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well, because that appears to be Ukraine's goal, although they also have a goal of reclaiming all of their lost territory, including Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea as well.
Lag.
I'm scared. What we got here?
Oh, I think we're back.
It looks like we're back immediately. That was some short lag.
And we're back.
And I love how YouTube said at the beginning of the stream, people probably won't be able to see it now. There's some copyrighted stuff, and, it never had any impact on anything. But with that, I've
never seen an impression cause a copyright warning before. That's something else.
Yeah, we might have to actually just have me do it, because if it's doing that on that, it might do that every night, and then one night the person who looks at that might go, oh, that's really him, and then they get us for it. But that's actually kind of wild that I was able to impersonate that specific person's voice well enough that it actually set off an alarm somewhere. That's actually kind of wild. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one comes from Fallen, who says, hi, Matt and Enforcer, and my question is, since Turkey is sending a mobile power plant to aid Ukraine, would it be a good idea to send a hospital ship too?
It would be a pretty good idea to send a hospital ship. It's just that with the Russians being the Russians, we can't really guarantee the safety of that hospital ship all the way to a port, and then it could also be considered a military ship since it technically is part of the Navy, and the Russians could be saying we're trying to sneak in weapons to Ukraine or something similar through that medical ship, and probably try and get away with it until we did something about it. So we technically could, but it may be somewhat dangerous. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one is from Laurie, who says, question for Enforcer. Putin's yearly address is on the 21st. No one apparently knows what he's going to say. So what do you think his announcement is going to be about?
His announcement is going to be something about, oh, the war in Ukraine, the great soldiers are still fighting it out, Bliat. It's a wonderful Bliat, and we're going to send up more guys down there to fight the thing, Bliat, and, all that good stuff, Bliat. If anything, it's not going to be anything meaningful. That's really my whole point of doing that. It's not going to be anything really meaningful, because everyone also thought he was going to say something big and profound on May 9th of last year, and they ended up really saying nothing meaningful or profound on May 9th, rather than some rhetoric to stir up the Russian public, and that's probably what he'll be doing again here on the 21st. And so with that, I hope that does answer that fairly well, that question. Actually, a fairly good one. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Charles Martel, who says, any clarity about why many countries ask their citizens and diplomats to leave Belarus? Any news on what is about to happen? And I actually didn't hear about that, Charles. I thought the American government asked citizens of the United States to leave Russia.
I didn't hear about that either, and I would have to be honest with you, I'm completely in the dark, and I'll have to declare ignorance because of that, because I haven't heard of such a thing occurring, but I'll look into that and try and get you an answer sometime in the future. Also, let's go to the beautiful town of Minsk. This is one of...
Did you ever watch that movie, Milan to Minsk?
No, I don't think so.
You know the one on Seinfeld?
Oh, no, I haven't.
24 hours to Milan to Minsk.
I didn't know that. That's incredibly cool. I thank you for sharing that with me, Matthew, and I also thank you for letting us know, so that way we can have a fun fact to work off of.
Wow, that building is lit up very brightly.
Man, the Belarusian power grid hardly works just because of these two buildings right here. They are sucking out most of the electricity in the nation. And also, what does this say? This says, Drokbro, I think. I don't know.
Drokbro.
Drokbro! But let's see here. There's their train station. Dude, that looks like a mall from, like, the 80s. That doesn't look that good.
I like that, actually. That's pretty cool.
I don't know, man. I bet you can find a better train station elsewhere, like in the West. Let's go look at France. We'll go to Paris, or as people like to call it, Paris, which seems really, I gotta be honest with y'all, really, really overdone. People need to stop doing that. Stop it right now. But let's drop down on Street View once it loads. Come on to this one here, because this thing looks impressive. So let's see if it's absolutely bossing. Come on.
Oh.
Wow, that is...
Paris.
Paris. Oh, la croissant. But still, that is a nice train. This is what I call a nice train station. That looks classy. The other one looks like an airport terminal, and I'm not really into it. I'm not a big fan of that.
Oh, oui. I heard when you go to Paris, the man pull up in Citroën and try to pawn off a fake fur coat on you for a scam.
Oh, man. I'm not going to... honestly, everyone's got a scam going, because if we go to New York City, Matthew, we're going to get scammed to buy someone's mixtape off the street. I'm not going to rat on the...
Not me.
Well, not me, but I'm not going to rat on the Parisians that bad, considering that's just like a big city thing, is to just get scammed. Also, look at the way these streets are laid out. It's just so interesting, because it's not a grid. The streets just go wherever.
It's chaotic, really. It's like, I got to be honest, not a fan of, like, the wild streets.
What? You're not a fan of wild streets? I'm a fan of wild streets.
Nice and gridlock-looking streets.
I like wild streets. It shows character development. Let me drop you down on a random one here. Like, look at this. Let's wait for it to load. This was taken in May of 2022. A la Paris. It looks nice. I like it.
Yeah. It's got its own thing going.
France...
I'd have to see it in person, to be honest, though, because I've heard some really, bad stories about Paris.
I bet you it's not that bad. We hear bad stories about London, too, and then we went there, and we were like, it's not that bad. It's actually quite nice. I mean, hell, really, anything looks nice when you're coming from Alabama, especially from where we used to be from. Everything
Roll
looks...
Tide.
Roll Tide. Not saying that Alabama's a bad place. Alabama has the nicest people I've ever met in it. But in terms of, looks and beauty, the cities... could use a little bit of improving. The nature, though, it's astonishing in Alabama. It's a really beautiful place of nature. But still, Someone said, those are some Vitaly said, those are some Mickey Mouse-sized streets. What? Okay, let me find a boulevard then, like this one. I'll show you what a boulevard looks like. This is, if it loads, a boulevard. This is what a boulevard looks like. It's actually not that big. Like, it's actually kind of narrow. Like, in America, this would be like a small highway.
What? You think it should be a small highway?
Yeah.
Huh. Maybe.
Hotel des Invalides.
What?
What? I know I'm saying that wrong, but
Invalids.
still. Military museum and interred. Wow, that thing's huge.
Oh wow! Did you see that 3D model they had of it?
Yeah, look at that. Let's go look at that again. Holy moly! Wow, that's in.
Wow, that's cool.
We can't move it around, but that's impressive. I've never seen this thing before. I'm sorry, y'all. This turned into like a Paris street. Wow, this thing is really impressive on the inside too. If the pictures would load. Man, this is
Paris.
Paris. Oh, la croissant.
What's important to remember is anyone can cook.
Oh, get out of here. Get out of here. But still, this is an impressive building. Very impressive. Oh, it's a Renault. I love these things. It's a Renault.
Where's Hoodoo Texas at?
Hoodoo
Is he still in the
Texas got
chat?
one of
Let's see.
these.
Ah, he got off for the night.
Oh, man, absolutely impressive. Wow. Maybe one day we'll go to Paris. I don't know. It looks pretty neat. Anyways, moving on from that, there are better train stations in Paris than that weird-looking one in Belarus. And I hope we answered your question fairly well, because neither of us had heard about American citizens or any citizens being told to leave Belarus. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Yoshi, who says, I'm hearing Bakhmut is about to be surrounded and a withdrawal is nearly certain. What does winning mean in your definition?
Winning means that the Russians are taking a sanitary day and they're not conducting any large activities. We can also see that in the casualty report, as the drop in casualties has been massive. And it appears that the Second Battle of Bakhmut may be coming to a close due to the Russian soldiers getting close to taking the town, but still incredibly far away due to the losses that they've sustained and most of the units being completely exhausted. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. That's what I call winning, because they won the first Battle of Bakhmut, although the Russians made some ground because they still held onto the city, and it appears that the second battle may have also ended right here, and they may have won this one as well by still holding on to the city. So with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope I addressed that fairly well.
All right, and let's see here. There we go. The next one goes to, guess who? Sweaty Chungus. Who is back? Sweaty Chungus is back.
Chungus.
Hey, he's back, and he has a question. He says, Matt, didn't the lady who was in charge of the Russian army payroll get thrown out of a high window yesterday?
You've been talking about that woman in St. Petersburg? Oh, she somersaulted out that window, I'll tell you what. But from what we know, yes, that was the woman, and she did get thrown out a window. Well, she fell out of a window, but we know she got thrown out of a window. So with that, I hope
Stumbled.
Fumble! Oh, we got a fumble, and the refs say it's fair. And the fumble was good, and they're going to get out the shovels and start scraping them off the street. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well, because from what we know, yes, she was pushed out of a window. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Paul Sterling, who says, are you concerned about a war of attrition?
I'm not really that concerned about a war of attrition. The Ukrainians have proven that they can hold against Russian onslaughts. The Russians also are not capable of conducting massive offensives, so the Ukrainians can focus a decent amount of their time and effort onto very small areas of the front line like Bakhmut alone. And so I wouldn't be that scared of a war of attrition, unless if we started to see tectonic shifts in support for Ukraine in the West. Then I would be scared about a war in attrition, but until then, I wouldn't find it to be all that much to worry about. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a question from Christian Cruz, who says, Putin is going to hold the speech on the 21st. With the coup rumors, could this be like Saddam Hussein's live speech where he named and killed his enemies? Raise your hand. Who votes for Putin? Raise your hand. Okay, go outside. We have a prize for you.
I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe he will. If he did, I think that would be insane. But it's not that far out of the question. He might pull off something like that. I guess you could say instead of getting Saddam, you get Putin now. Or, in more modern terms, you could get Alec Baldwin, because that also is a thing now, too. But with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And I swear it was a blank, I swear. But with that, we're on to the next one. I hope we answered that fairly well.
And honestly, I don't think he would do a Saddam Hussein style execution deal where he like sends people outside and has them killed. I think he would simply kill them off the way he's always done it, by falling out the window. But up next, we have a question from Thomas O'Hanlon, who says, "You know that the M5 Ripsaw is going through trials with the Army as an unmanned tank."
The M5 Ripsaw. What a name.
Yes, that little tank I was talking about.
Oh, that little tankette. Oh, look at that. Isn't that cute? This thing looks like a modern M22 Locust. Here, I'll show you a picture of these side by side so that way you can see it too, Matthew. M22 Locust. So, I hope you see the similarities here. Let me get a good picture of a side by side profile. Here we go. So, okay, maybe not that one. That one's messed up a little. Let me go get this one. So M22 Locust, M5 Ripsaw. Yeah, it does. You know it does.
Somewhat.
It's got a little low profile, a giant turret, well, relative to its hull size. It's got almost the same kind of suspension. Thing looks like a big automated M22 Locust.
The Ripsaw looks like it would be a lot faster than the other tank because it looks sporty. Also, it's made by Textron Systems.
Textron?
Don't they make Cessnas?
I thought they did. Let's go look at this thing. Oh, we can get one for $295,000.
Oh, that's cheap.
Let's see. M5 Ripsaw. I gotta go see this thing on a website because now I'm interested. Let's see. Textron Systems. Here's a Ripsaw M5. You can buy one of the extreme mobility, decisive lethality, wingman ready. Just in case you want to have a jaunt in the woods, take your M5 with you. So... Scalable commonality between medium and light variants. It has a drivetrain, diesel, hybrid electric, and it's modular, field modularity based on mission. But we want to know about the civilian version. That kind of looks like it may be the civilian version. What the hell would someone need that for in the civilian world? You know, like, not saying that people shouldn't buy it. I think it's pretty cool, but what in the world would you be using this for? Also, Matthew, this thing's getting
going to Walmart.
This thing, Matthew, right here, the Ripsaw, is being fitted with an R40 turret and is being tested at Fort Dix. Oh, that's funny.
What's so funny about that?
Oh, nothing at all. But still, it does look pretty cool.
It looks pretty neat, I gotta admit.
It looks pretty cool. And I would say that thing's pretty cool, and I thank you for sharing that with us because I didn't know about this thing, and it looks pretty neat. Someone said deer hunting. I could see it being used for deer hunting. You just had to be very accurate and make sure to just take off the neck, or else the body's going to get vaporized by the shell. But still, I thank you for sharing that with us. Pretty cool. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next question goes to the Sunken Grave, who says, would a large-scale aerial attack from the Russian Air Force change the course of the war?
Matthew, actually, I can't answer that one because you sent that question to the Sunken Grave, so I have no idea what that question is. But I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh, dang.
But to answer that question, I don't think it'll change the course of the war. The Russians have already conducted mass air campaigns at the beginning of the war and with their strategic bombers throughout the war, and it's not changed it, so I don't think it's going to change it now. If anything, it would be like Operation Linebacker during the Vietnam War, which had literally no impact on the war. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt because I don't know everything. My haters always say I know everything. Apparently because they think I do, but I don't. So just take it with a grain of salt. That's what I think. But, you know, do your own research and look into it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to White Wolf, who says, do you think Putin will try and rush the T-14 to meet the Leopard?
I don't think he will, because there's really no way for them to do that. A lot of the technology used in the T-14 was actually had to be imported into Russia for it to be used. for example, the site's optics and such things like that. So I would say it's most likely not going to happen unless if it's way less capable than its original iterations from 2015. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And OK Chicken Choker said, "You got haters?" Yes, I do. It's quite funny though when you hear them because they say things that are markedly untrue. But it's always hilarious because they've like lived in a lie so long they believe it. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a question from Tiger2, who says, with the recent public statements from several Western countries' leaders' concerns about the rate of depletion of ammunition left in and for Ukraine, are we doing enough?
I don't think we are in terms of ammunition support, and you've got a great question there, Tiger 2, because I think we should start ramping up artillery support a whole lot more than we have right now. Because, for example, let's say we send 25,000 artillery shells per every supply package, which comes around every 3 months or so. So 25,000 in 3 months, so 90 days. So let's say 25,000 divided by 90. That means that the Ukrainians across an entire nearly 500 to 600 mile long front line, which is about 100 to 200 miles longer than the Western Front we saw in the First World War, they can only fire around 278 shells per day, which is actually quite small. That means that for every Russian killed, for every 4 Russians killed per day on average over the past 2 to 3 weeks, only 1 artillery shell was fired for that 4. So I would say we do need to send more artillery shells in support to them, because when you measure it like that, and you look at the metrics there, that is an incredibly small amount of artillery shells to be used over a 500-mile long front line per day. And also, when you think about that, it's 500 miles, and they can only fire about 270-something shells, so that means that they can only fire 1 shell per every 2 miles of the front line. Which really tells you how small the amount of shells they can fire off of that allotment is. So with that, we are on to the next one. I hope that addresses that fairly well, and I do think we should ramp up the support in that regard.
Me too. And up next, we have a question from Texas T, who says, Matt and Enforcer, what are y'all's thoughts on Ukraine using cluster bombs on waves of Russians?
I haven't seen them use cluster bombs on waves of Russians, so unfortunately I have to declare ignorance on that. If you can find us some video or picture evidence of them using cluster bombs on the Russians, let me know, because I'd like to see it, but I haven't seen that yet. So with that, we are on to the next one. I hope we try to address why we can't address that well right now.
All right. And up next, we have a question from Swindon Badger, who says, did you guys mention the tank infantry push in Volodar, or have you seen the footage? Tanks down to Arty, the push begins to fail.
We've been watching that for quite a few weeks at this point, I believe 2 to 3 weeks, and we have seen the battle go from raging incredibly well, especially in the Ukrainians' favor, to now it's just a light trickle of vehicles and equipment that we see in the area around Volodar, and it appears that the battle has largely died. And according to Prigozhin on Telegram today, he actually said that that was a great indicator of why the conventional Russian army cannot conduct offensives, because it's deadly dangerous for them, like, for example, in Volodar. So we have been watching that. We have been seeing it. Yes, that the answer to that question is yes. And so with that, we're on to the next one. I hope we addressed that fairly well.
All right. And the next one goes to Saswai90, who says, I heard that the president and EU are pressuring Ukraine to counterattack soon. It seems concerning that they might cause Ukraine to act unpreparedly, and how can they tightrope the situation?
The Ukrainians could tightrope the situation by saying, behind the scenes, we can't attack right now. It's not advantageous, but at the same time, the United States may have some information that shows it is advantageous to attack at this very moment, and that may be why they're trying to pressure them, although I feel like that may be an attempt at guided misdirection by the United States, considering that saying something like that publicly is usually not our go-to, especially when you're talking about conducting a war. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Avari Mendebratis again, who says, Enforcer, which Russian military branch do you think gets the most operating and upgrade money? Surface fleet, submarines, nuclear, Air Force, Army, Special Forces, etc.
I would say that the one we see getting the most money at the moment would appear to be the Russian Air Force, but that's said lightly because hardly any of them get money. It comes in trickles. But it appears that the Russian Air Force is getting the most of the money because they've been able to develop some Su-57s, and there actually has been proof that about 4 Su-57s have been operated within the theater, the Ukrainian theater, but we haven't seen them in large numbers, and those are the only 4 that apparently have entered production. So that's something interesting, and considering that technology, which is low visibility, not entirely stealth, it's just low visibility, is incredibly expensive and brand new for the Russians, it shows that they may be getting a large amount of money in the Air Force. And also, a lot of the modernizations of aircraft, for example, the Su-35s and the Su-34s, which have come around, I guess you could say, as fairly newer iterations. We can see that the first flight of the Su-35S was in 2008, which was only 15 years ago. We can see that a lot of the money in terms of development on aircraft is there, as compared to everything else, where the Russian Navy has not had any large new ships introduced ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union. We haven't seen any incredibly new submarines except for the Belgrade. The Belgrade's really the only one I can think of that's modern and actually built after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Russian army has been having to deal with old Soviet vintage vehicles, and now they're only starting to see maybe the fledgling looks of modernization, such as new Ratnik camo and a Ratnik kit, along with the T-72B3 modifications and such things, but those are fairly cheap. So I would say, in my opinion, the Air Force appears to be getting most of the money, which is kind of ironic because we see them being used the least so far in this war. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And with that, believe it or not, we're about to be rounding out this question segment. So who was the second to last person to get a question in?
All right, so we have a question from Psychotic Dom, who says, what would be the best thing we could send to Ukraine? Just your opinion. And also he says, I don't think this one will make it on the stream. Well, it did. And really good question. And to be honest with you, before the Enforcer answers, I think that we should be sending Ukraine enough ammo by default to keep them going in the war. So I don't really think that's something that should be a major issue. We should be sending it anyway. The best main thing we could send them are fighter jets, in my opinion. Because as the West is constantly crying about, Russia is building up helicopters, fighter jets, all kinds of aircraft on the border. So why not arm Ukraine with capable fighter jets as well to combat that? But then the West gets coy. They don't want to send the jets, and I have no idea why, because it seems like we could send them without an issue. We don't really need the spare jets that we were willing to send. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say the same thing as far as the artillery shells are concerned. We should just be doing that by default, so that's not really something I would say needs to be prioritized. I would still focus on the abstract, but make sure to heavily harp on sending the basic building blocks to support. And I would say that we should be sending F-18s, not F-16s, because we went back and revisited that, and thanks to some interesting insight by Trister that I never thought about before, the F-18 would be a far better option for the Ukrainians, considering it can handle the short runways and also a different kind of asphalt than the F-16 can, just due to how rugged it has to be. So I'd say that the F-18 certainly should be something we send to Ukraine. It can operate in an air superiority role and an air-to-ground role, which makes it, an altogether go-getter. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, Avari. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And the lucky last viewer of the night is Brian DeLauro. He says, do you think the Wagner will turn against the Russians?
I don't think the Wagner will turn against the Russians, considering that they've largely been decimated, and now they're not allowed to recruit prisoner conscripts anymore. So we're seeing that their numbers are starting to dwindle and disappear. So we may never see the Wagner group rise again beyond the second battle of BAKHMUT. It appears that they've been completely killed off in that battle, and it appears that Prigozhin, day by day, is starting to lose his notoriety in the Russian media, and the Wagner group is as well. So we may see that the Wagner group was, at one point, a political foe, but Putin was able to ensure that that political foe would never have the chance to rise, and he never had to go through any extreme measures such as assassinating Prigozhin or having the Wagner group found out to be traitors and then have them all put in prison. So I believe we'll never see it now, sadly, but it was a good thought for a while, and it seemed as though it would be something that was going to happen soon. But with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well. And guess what? It is the end of tonight's stream. Tonight's been a fantastic stream in fundraiser support. $9,500 raised in support of Razom for Ukraine. And it's incredible to know that so many of y'all have helped out such a great fundraiser that helps out soldiers in one of the best ways possible, which is ensuring that they will have a future beyond this war. And of course, I thank you all so much once again for watching the news and this question segment. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the like button, and also make sure to comment as we run this stream every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Monday. So tomorrow we will not be on air, but you can count for us to be back on Tuesday, covering the past 48 hours of the war in Ukraine, and then the rest of that week's news up until the 24th, where we'll have our podcast, and then we'll go right back to usual broadcasting the next day after Friday. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope you all have a great night. Stay safe, take care, good luck, and Slava Ukraini.
Love Ukraine. Jaga jaga. Good night.
Yes. The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Ще не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу.